I have $1.37. Is that enough for soup? A 6-year-old said. 77 bikers went silent. 77 motorcycles rattled the diner windows like thunder you couldn't escape. Leather vests, road dust, faces that didn't smile for strangers. The waitress had already reached for the phone under the counter when a 6-year-old boy walked straight up to their biggest table, opened his small fist, and poured coins onto the wood. I have $1.37. Is that enough for soup? Every biker went silent. Even the grill seemed to stop breathing. The club president's eyes dropped to the paper wristband on the boy's arm, and his throat tightened when he read the last name. Before we continue, tell us in the comments where you are watching this from. The name printed in black ink. Harper. For a beat, nobody moved. The boy stood there with his chin up like he'd practiced being brave. Chapped cheeks, a hoodie too thin for February, fingers red from cold. The president, Mason, slid the coins back toward the child like they might crack. Hey, he said, voice low. What's your name? Eli. How old are you, Eli? 6. You here by yourself? Eli nodded once, then corrected himself. Quick. My mom's here. She can't get up. A chair shifted. Not aggressive. Alert. 77 men didn't ride together without learning how fast a room could turn. Mason looked up at the waitress. Her tag read, Donna. She was watching him like she was braced for the worst. What's the cheapest soup? Mason asked. Chicken noodle, Donna said. Cup is $3.50. Eli flinched at the number and started pulling his coins back into his fist. I can get more, he blurted. I can find. Mason covered the coins with his palm, stopping them from scattering. No, you don't have to. He reached into his vest, peeled off a 20, and set it on the table. 2 bowls, he said to Donna. 1 here, 1 to go. Extra crackers. Donna hesitated, then nodded and turned toward the kitchen like she was afraid if she stayed, she'd cry. Eli didn't sit. He kept his eyes on the patches, on the heavy boots, on the hands that could be kind or cruel. He'd learned not to assume. Mason leaned down a little, bringing his face closer without crowding him. Where's your mom staying? Eli's gaze flicked to the window and back. He tugged at his sleeve as if it hurt to talk about it. The paper wristband was hospital bright, the kind they snap on in the ER, today's date. That same last name again. Sunrise Motel, Eli whispered. Room 12, by the ice machine. Mason's jaw tightened. Is she sick? Eli nodded. She's hot. She says she's fine. She's not fine. Why'd she leave the hospital? Mason asked. Eli swallowed. They said money. Donna came back with steam rising from a bowl and a paper bag folded tight around another. She set the hot bowl in front of Eli and slid the bag toward him. Eli stared at the soup like it was something you could lose if you blinked wrong. He lifted the spoon with both hands, took a sip, and his shoulders dropped an inch. Relief, not pleasure. Relief was what broke Mason the most. Outside, through the front glass, a patrol car rolled past the diner slow as syrup, not stopping, not leaving, just circling. Mason didn't stare at it. Staring made you a target. He watched Eli instead. Does someone stay with you and your mom? Mason asked. Eli's spoon paused. Sometimes. Who? Eli's voice went small. Mike. The way he said it wasn't a kid talking about family. It was a kid naming weather he couldn't control. Mason kept his face neutral. Mike a good guy? Eli didn't answer. He just took another sip like he could swallow the question. The patrol car circled back and parked across the street, angled toward the diner. Engine running, lights off, somebody inside watching the front door. Donna followed Mason's eyes and went pale. That's Deputy Rourke, she whispered. He's been around a lot lately. How about right now? Mason asked. Donna's lips pressed tight. He's always around when he wants to be. Eli finished half the bowl fast, then reached for the paper bag like it might be stolen. He hugged it to his chest. That's for your mom, Mason said. Eli nodded hard. Thank you. Mason pointed at the bag. When you bring that back, does Mike get mad? Eli's throat bobbed. He tried to smile and failed. I'll say Donna gave it. Donna's eyes flashed with anger. Sweetheart, Eli cut her off, urgent. He won't yell at Donna, he'll yell at me. The words landed heavy, not loud. Heavy. A whole diner heard them anyway. Mason's gaze went back to the wristband for a half second. Harper. His chest tightened like a walk straight back. Don't talk to Deputy Walk Straight Back. Don't talk to Deputy Rourke. Don't talk to anybody else. You go to your mom. Eli nodded, eyes wide. Mason added softer. If anyone tries to take that soup from you, you come right back here. You understand? Eli nodded again, faster, like he was terrified to get it wrong. Donna reached out and squeezed his shoulder. Be safe, baby. Eli hopped down, pushed the door open, and cold air flooded the diner. The bell over the door rang too bright in the sudden silence. Outside, the patrol car's engine revved slightly, a reminder. Eli was barely 10 steps away when the patrol car door opened. Deputy Rourke got out slow, like time belonged to him. Early 30s, clean uniform, a smile that looked friendly until you noticed it never reached his eyes. He crossed the street and walked into the diner like he owned the place. The bell jingled again. Rourke scanned the room, then let his gaze settle on the long table of vests. That's a lot of motorcycles for one little diner, he said, voice easy. Mason stayed standing, hands visible. We're eating. Rourke's eyes flicked to Eli's empty seat, then to the window. Kid just leave? Yeah, Mason said. Rourke nodded like he was making a note. And you fed him? Mason didn't flinch. He asked for soup. Rourke took 2 slow steps closer, stopping at the end of the table. That boy's under my watch. His mom's complicated, and Mike doesn't like strangers getting involved. Sky's chair shifted a fraction. Tank's jaw flexed. Mason felt the whole table tighten, but nobody moved. Mike who? Mason asked. Rourke's smile thinned. Mike, that's all you need. He glanced at Donna. You okay, Donna? Donna swallowed. I'm fine, Deputy. Rourke looked back at Mason. Here's how this works. You pass through, you spend your money, you leave. You don't follow kids to motels, you don't knock on doors, you don't make my day messy. Mason kept his voice flat. If a 6-year-old is counting change for soup, your day's already messy. The smile slipped for half a second, just enough to show the hard part underneath. Then it came back. You don't know that woman, Rourke said softly. You don't know what she does when she needs something. I know she's sick, Mason replied. Rourke shrugged. People get sick. People still make choices. He leaned in a hair like he wanted Mason to feel the badge without being touched. Don't follow him. Mason held his gaze. Why? Because I said so, Rourke said, and this time there was no warmth in it. For a long second, the diner was a pressure cooker. Then Rourke stepped back, smile returning like he'd won something. Enjoy your lunch, he said, loud again, and keep it peaceful. He walked out. As the bell jingled, the woman in the corner, black coffee untouched, stood and left through the side door without looking at anyone, like she didn't want her face remembered. Donna whispered, furious and scared at the same time. He's going to take it out on that kid. Mason watched the street. That's why we're going. He didn't say it out loud, but the name on that wristband kept flashing in his head like a warning sign. Harper. The kind of name you didn't forget if you'd ever promised somebody something and failed. Mason picked up his jacket and dropped cash on the table without counting. 2 bikes only, he said, calm but final. Quiet. No pack. Sky was already standing. Tank looked like he wanted to argue and didn't. The rest stayed seated, eyes tracking Mason like they were letting him carry the whole room's restraint on his shoulders. Mason stepped out into the cold and headed for his bike, keeping his eyes on the corner where Eli had disappeared. Sky's boots crunched on salt behind him. 2 engines, not 77. Mason swung a leg over his bike and didn't start it right away. Across the road, Deputy Rourke sat in his patrol car, one hand on the wheel, eyes on the mirrors. He didn't drive off. He wanted them to move first. Mason waited through one long breath, then keyed his ignition. The engine came alive low, controlled. Skies followed a second later. Far ahead, a small figure crossed under a flickering sign that read, Sunrise Motel. Mason eased out, keeping the gap wide enough to look harmless and close enough to matter, and rolled after the child. The Sunrise Motel sign buzzed and blinked, painting the gravel lot in sick red flashes. Doors lined up like teeth. Curtains never quite closed. The ice machine groaned beside room 12, exactly where Eli said it would be. Mason rolled past once, kept his head forward, then turned into the side lane and parked behind a dumpster where the light was dead. Sky killed her engine beside him. 2 bikes, no pack, no noise. Across the lot, Deputy Rourke's cruiser sat near the office, angled like it wanted a clear view of every door. "You see heat on the hood?" Skye asked. Mason nodded. "He was here." A man in a motel jacket stepped out of the office, saw their vests, then slipped back inside. They moved on foot, slow and ordinary. Eli was already at his door, trying to swipe a key card with fingers that shook from cold. The bag of soup hugged to his chest. Red light, click, red again. Eli's eyes darted around the lot, panic rising. Skye stopped a few steps away and kept her hands low. "Try it slower." Eli swallowed, swiped again. Green. He pushed the door open a crack. Warm, stale air leaked out. "Mom," he called, voice small. "I brought—" "Eli, close the door." The woman's voice was thin, sharp from exhaustion. Eli hesitated and looked back at Mason like he needed permission to breathe. Mason didn't step closer. "Tell her you met us at the diner. Tell her you came back safe." Eli nodded and slipped inside. The door stayed partly open, a narrow slice of the room visible. One bed, a heap of clothes, a small table wobbling under a stained lamp. "You can't bring people here," the woman whispered, urgent. They just bought soup," Eli said fast. A wet cough cut her answer in half. Another followed, deeper, like it hurt to pull air in. Then the door opened wider, just enough for her to look out. She was young, but sickness made her face older. Flushed cheeks, glassy eyes, hair yanked into a messy knot. One hand gripped the frame like it was holding her upright. Her gaze locked on Mason's vest and Skye's. Fear hit fast. "No," she breathed. "Please, just leave." Mason kept his voice low. "Ma'am, we're not looking for trouble. We're leaving. We just wanted the kid back to you." Her eyes flicked past them, scanning the lot, not at the bikes, at the corners, the office, the cruiser. "Trouble finds this place," she said, and tried to close the door. Eli stepped into view behind her, clutching the paper bag. "Mom, you need to eat." The woman's eyes dropped to the bag. Steam pushed through the paper. Her face softened for 1 second, then tightened again like she remembered what kindness costs. "Put it on the table," she told him. Eli hurried to obey. Mason's gaze caught a bright plastic band on her wrist as she shifted. Hospital white, today's date, last name in black print. Harper. He didn't react. He didn't let his voice change. "You went to the hospital." "I went," she said, defensive. "They didn't keep me." "You should be in bed," Skye said gently. "I am in bed," the woman snapped, then swayed as if her body wanted to prove her wrong. She steadied herself on the frame, breath shallow. "We're fine." The room was tight and brutal. One bed with a thin blanket, a chair propped with a phone book, a space heater aimed at nothing, and empty medicine bottles on the sink. On the table, next to the soup, lay a folded paper with a clinic logo and a handwritten note. "Pay by Friday." A car tire crunched on gravel. Skye turned first. The woman turned too. Her shoulders went rigid, like she'd been yanked on a string. Deputy Rourke's voice floated in, easy and pleased. "Well, well." Boots approached without hurry. Mason turned, hands open. Rourke stopped a few feet away, smiling like he'd been waiting for this exact picture. 2 bikers at a sick woman's door. "I told you not to follow the kid," Rourke said. "We didn't," Mason replied. "We're returning him to his mom." Rourke angled his body so he could see into the room. "Lena," he called, suddenly gentle. "You okay?" The woman's throat worked. "I'm fine." Rourke nodded like a teacher hearing the right answer. "Good. Because I'm seeing strangers at your door, and I'm thinking I might need to keep you safe." He took a half step closer, eyes sliding past Mason to the soup on the table. "Oh, look at that. Somebody feeding you." Lena's cheeks flushed darker, shame mixing with fear. They were leaving. Mason kept his tone flat. He asked for soup. We bought it. "How generous," Rourke said, then looked at the boy. "Hey, buddy, come here a second." Eli froze. Lena's hand shot back, not grabbing Eli, just hovering like she wanted to pull him in and knew she wasn't allowed. "Eli, don't!" Rourke's smile stayed, but his eyes sharpened. "Didn't ask you, Lena." He extended his hand again toward the doorway like he was inviting. "Come on, let's talk." Eli stepped back instead, pressing into the room. Rourke's mouth twitched. "That's all right. I'll come to you." He started to step into the doorway. Mason didn't touch him. He simply shifted one foot, filling the threshold with his body like a wall you couldn't pass without making it obvious you were forcing your way through. Rourke stopped inches away, the smile thinning. "Move." "We're not inside," Mason said. "We're leaving." Rourke's eyes slid to Skye. "You recording?" Skye didn't blink. "Why would I need to?" Rourke's gaze returned to Mason, bright with threat. "You want to play games? I can call this trespassing. I can call this intimidation. I can call child services and make it a long night." Lena made a small sound behind him, like she'd been punched in the stomach. "Please don't." Rourke turned his head slightly, voice soft as velvet. "Then answer me. Did you invite them here?" Lena hesitated, eyes dropping. "Tell him," Rourke said. They just walked him back," she forced. "There we go," Rourke said, satisfied. He tapped the doorframe with 2 knuckles like he owned the building. "Now you two. You leave, and you don't come back." Skye's jaw tightened. "We're already leaving." Rourke's eyes slid to her like he was choosing where to press. "I'm talking to him." He nodded at Mason. "Name?" "Mason." Rourke nodded as if filing it away. "Mason, here's the thing. You don't get to play hero in my town. You get to buy lunch and ride out." Mason didn't move. "That boy shouldn't be begging for food." Rourke smiled wider. "Then maybe his mama should make better choices." Lena's breath hitched, like the words were a slap she wasn't allowed to react to. Her sleeve rode up as she tightened her grip on the door, and Mason caught the edge of a yellowing bruise on her forearm before she hit it again. Rourke reached a hand toward her, not a grab, just 2 fingers landing on her forearm. Lena flinched anyway. Mason felt his spine go tight, but he stayed still. "Don't touch her." Rourke finally looked at him. "Or what?" "Or you explain why a deputy is squeezing a sick woman in front of witnesses," Mason said. Rourke's eyes flicked across the lot. A curtain twitched in a nearby room. The motel jacket man hovered by the office door, pretending not to see. Someone was watching. Someone always was. Rourke lifted his hand away like he'd never touched her at all. "See? Peaceful," he said. He stepped back, smile returning to full brightness. "You heard me. Leave." Mason shifted his weight back slow, showing he wasn't escalating. Skye mirrored him. They backed down the walkway. Lena stayed in the doorway, eyes down, one hand tight around her own arm. Eli peeked out from behind her, watching Mason like he was trying to hold on to the only adult in the last hour who didn't scare him. Halfway to the corner, Mason caught movement at the far end of the lot. A dark sedan. A woman standing beside it, half in shadow. Same stillness as the diner. She lifted a hand to her ear as if listening, then lowered it again. A phone screen glinted once, pointed in their direction. When Mason's eyes met hers, she didn't look away. Rourke noticed Mason's glance and leaned in, voice low. "Everybody watches," he murmured. "You don't want to be the show." Mason didn't answer. He walked to the edge of the building where the ice machine's hum covered words. Rourke stayed close enough to crowd without touching. "Good choice," he said. "Now go." Skye waited until they were out of earshot, then spoke through her teeth. "He's daring us." Mason nodded once. "He wants a headline." Behind them, a cough tore through the thin motel walls, longer, rougher. Then Eli's voice, small and terrified. "Mom?" Lena's reply didn't come right away. Mason turned his head toward room 12. The air smelled suddenly sharper, like fever and stale heat. He didn't hesitate. He pulled his phone out. "Call goes in," he said to Skye. "On the record." Skye's eyes narrowed. "He'll try to stop it." "Let him try." Mason hit dial and lifted the phone to his ear, staring across the lot at Deputy Rourke's cruiser as the line rang. The line picked up on the second ring. 911, what's the address of your emergency?" Mason didn't look away from Deputy Rourke's cruiser. "Sunrise Motel off Route 9, room 12. Adult female, high fever, severe coughing, trouble breathing. She needs an ambulance now." "Sir, is she conscious?" "Yes," Mason said. "Barely steady. She's deteriorating." "Are you with the patient?" "I'm outside the room. Her child is inside. A uniformed deputy is on scene and is trying to prevent help." Skye's head snapped toward him. "You said that on purpose." Mason kept his voice even. "I want it in the audio." "Stay on the line," the dispatcher said. "I'm sending EMS. Do not hang up." "Sir, what is the patient's name?" Mason glanced at the door. "Ma'am," he called, not shouting. "What's your name?" A pause, then, through the thin door, a ragged voice. "Lena." "Last name?" Mason asked. Another cough, wet and hard. "Harper." Mason felt the name hit him in the chest again, but he kept his tone flat. "Lena Harper," he told the dispatcher. "She has a wristband from today, likely left the ER. She's getting worse." Rourke stepped into view, slow, smile in place like he was strolling a fairground. "You calling 911?" he asked, voice bright enough for the motel windows. Mason didn't answer him. He spoke into the phone. "Deputy is approaching. I'm not interfering with his duties. I'm requesting medical help." "Sir, I need you to stay calm," the dispatcher said. Mason almost laughed. "I am calm." Rourke came closer until he could hear the dispatcher's voice, then leaned in. "You can hang up," he said. "We've got it handled." Mason kept the phone at his ear. "No, we don't." Rourke's smile didn't move, but his eyes sharpened. "Mason, right? Here's what you're going to do. You're going to end the call, get back on your bikes, and leave." Skye shifted her weight, a fraction, not aggressive. "Ready." Mason didn't look at her. "Sir," he told the dispatcher, "he is instructing me to cancel the ambulance." "Deputy," the dispatcher's voice carried faintly through the phone, "this is emergency services. Do not obstruct the caller. EMS is en route." Rourke's jaw twitched. He hadn't expected his own badge to be on record. He reached out, slow, for Mason's phone. Mason moved it away without jerking, still on the line. "Do not touch me," he said quietly. Rourke froze mid-gesture, smiling like it was a joke between friends. "Relax." "I'm relaxed," Mason said. "Don't put your hands on a witness while a call's recorded." Behind them, curtains twitched. Somebody in a nearby room had their phone up, the screen's glow flashing as they filmed. Rourke noticed the glow. His smile widened for the audience. "See? They're already calling themselves witnesses. That's intimidation, folks." Skye lifted her own phone, thumb tapping to start recording. Not in his face. Just enough. Rourke's eyes flicked to it and hardened. "Turn that off." Skye's voice stayed level. "Why?" "Because I'm telling you." Skye nodded once, then put it in writing. Rourke turned toward room 12 and knocked like he owned the door. "Lena, open up." Inside, Eli's voice was small and frantic. "Mom, please." The door opened a crack. Lena appeared, swaying, one hand braced on the frame. Her skin was too flushed, sweat shining along her hairline. She tried to pull air like it was stuck behind something. Rourke's tone softened into performance. "Lena, you okay? I heard some drama out here." Lena's eyes jumped from Rourke to Mason, fear and anger and exhaustion. "I don't need—" Her words broke into a cough so hard she had to fold forward. Eli's hands grabbed her waist from behind to steady her. Mason didn't step in. He stayed outside the threshold. "Lena, an ambulance is coming." Her head snapped up. "No." "Mom," Eli whispered. Lena shook her head, a fast, desperate motion. "No, we can't. They'll bill us. They'll—" Her eyes flicked to Rourke like she'd said too much. Rourke's smile remained gentle. "See? She doesn't want it. That's her choice." Mason kept his voice low. "Lena, you can't breathe. This isn't about money." "It is always about money," she rasped. "And he—" She stopped. Her gaze dropped. Rourke's eyes narrowed. "He what?" Lena swallowed like it hurt. "Nothing." Eli looked between them, clutching the paper bag with the soup like it was armor. "She gets worse at night," he blurted. "She shakes and she says, 'Don't tell Mike.'" Rourke's face tightened for half a second at the name. Mason caught it. So did Skye. Rourke laughed once, light and empty. "Kids say things. Eli, go sit down." Eli didn't move. Rourke's smile slipped toward irritation. "Eli." Lena flinched at the tone. She grabbed the doorframe harder. Her sleeve rode up again, exposing more of that bruising. Not one bruise. Several, layered like fingerprints that had been pressed too hard. Skye's eyes went cold. Mason heard sirens in the distance, faint but growing. Relief was immediate, then chased by the knowledge that sirens didn't always mean rescue when the wrong people controlled the scene. The ambulance swung into the motel lot, lights washing the walls. A second vehicle followed, a smaller county unit, not Rourke's, braking hard like it was trying to catch up. 2 EMTs jumped out. One, a woman with her hair pinned tight under a cap, moved fast. The other, older, carried the bag and the monitor. Rourke stepped forward to meet them, smile back in place. "All good here," he called. "False alarm, you can clear." The female EMT didn't slow. "We got a respiratory complaint, fever, possible pneumonia. That's not a false alarm." Rourke put a hand out, palm up in a hold gesture. "I'm law enforcement on scene. Patient refused transport." The EMT looked at his badge, then at Mason and Skye, then at the door where Lena clung to the frame like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "Ma'am," the EMT called past Rourke, "I need to assess you." Lena's eyes darted. She tried to straighten. "I'm fine." The EMT walked up the steps, stopping short of the doorway. "Can you take a deep breath for me?" Lena tried. The inhale caught, shallow and ugly, and she immediately coughed again, body trembling. The EMT didn't flinch. "Temperature? Any chest pain? Any history of asthma?" Lena shook her head, then winced like even that motion was too much. Rourke stepped closer, voice low, meant only for the EMT. "She doesn't have insurance. She'll refuse. Don't waste time." The EMT turned to him, eyes hard. "Deputy, step back. You are not medical." Rourke's smile tightened. "I'm protecting her from a bill she can't pay." Mason spoke into his phone, still on the line. "EMS has arrived. Deputy is attempting to cancel care. I'm witnessing." The dispatcher's voice was a steady thread in his ear. "Sir, stay where you are. Do not engage." Rourke heard the dispatcher's faint voice. His nostrils flared. He didn't need to go in. This is not optional if you need to go in. This is not optional if you want to stay alive. Lena's eyes widened with panic, not at the words, but at what going in meant. "Eli, I can't leave him," she whispered. "I'll ride with you," the female EMT said quickly. "We can bring him." Rourke cut in. "No." "The child stays with me." Eli's whole body went rigid. "No," he whispered, and it sounded like he'd practiced that word in his head 1,000 times and still hated it. Lena's hand trembled. "He stays with me." Rourke's voice stayed smooth. "Lena, you're not thinking clearly. I can take him. You get treatment." Lena's eyes flicked to Mason again, pleading without asking. She couldn't say the truth with Rourke standing there. Mason's voice stayed calm. "Eli rides with his mom. That's normal." Rourke's smile sharpened. "You don't decide what's normal here." The female EMT looked between them, then pointed at her own radio. "I'll call his supervisor and CPS if needed, but I'm not leaving a 6-year-old separated from his primary caregiver in the middle of a medical crisis because someone with a badge wants control." Rourke's eyes flashed. "Watch your tone. Watch your interference," she shot back. Rourke stepped toward her, just enough to loom. "I can make this difficult." Skye lifted her phone slightly higher. "You already are." The other county unit door opened and a second deputy got out. Older, tired eyes, face like he'd lived through too many bad calls. He took one look at the scene and sighed. "Rourke," he called, warning in his voice, "what are you doing?" Rourke turned, smile forced. "Nothing, handling a situation." "By blocking EMS?" the older deputy asked. He looked at the EMTs. "What's the status?" "Low oxygen, high fever, respiratory distress," the older EMT said. "She needs transport." The older deputy's gaze moved to Lena. He softened his voice. "Ma'am, do you want medical care?" Lena's lips parted. She stared at Rourke, then at Eli, then at Mason, as if choosing which danger was survivable. I can't pay," she whispered. The older deputy nodded once. "That's not your decision right now. That's paperwork later. Right now is breathing." Lena's eyes filled. She gave the smallest nod. Rourke's smile collapsed into something tight and cold. "Lena," the older deputy held up a hand. "Enough." She said yes. Rourke's gaze went hard, but he stepped back, suddenly aware there were too many witnesses now. Too many recordings, too much audio. The EMTs guided Lena out carefully. Eli moved with them, hands trying to help, then grabbing the soup bag again like he couldn't leave it behind. "You can bring that," the female EMT told him, as if it mattered, as if small comforts mattered when you were terrified. Eli nodded fast, eyes wet, and climbed into the ambulance with Lena. As the doors closed, Lena reached through the gap and caught Mason's wrist. Not a grip, a touch like an apology she couldn't speak. Her fingers were hot, trembling. "Thank you," she rasped, then coughed again so hard she had to turn away. The doors shut. The latch clicked. Rourke stood in the flashing light, face unreadable now. "You happy?" he asked Mason, voice low. Mason ended the 911 call only after the dispatcher confirmed the transport. He slid his phone into his vest. "I'm happy she's alive." Rourke's eyes narrowed. "This isn't over." Sky's jaw tightened. "It never is with people like you." The older deputy cleared his throat, tired of it already. "Rourke, get back in your unit." Rourke smiled at him like they were friends, then looked back at Mason. "Ride safe," he said, and it sounded like a threat. The ambulance pulled out of the lot, lights strobing across the motel windows. Eli's small face appeared for 1 second behind the glass, soup bag on his lap, eyes locked on Mason until the vehicle turned and disappeared. Mason and Sky didn't follow close. They kept distance, like normal traffic, like they weren't two vests in a town that wanted them gone. In the side mirror, Rourke's cruiser rolled out behind them, steady, patient, as if he had all the time in the world. The county hospital sat off the highway like a concrete bunker, fluorescent and exhausted. The ambulance cut around to the ER bay, lights still flashing, and disappeared behind a rolling door. Mason and Sky didn't rush the entrance. Running made you look guilty. They parked, took off helmets, and walked in like two people who knew exactly where they were going and didn't want anyone to panic about it. Inside, the waiting room smelled like antiseptic and burnt coffee. A TV murmured above a wall of vending machines. A toddler cried. An old man stared at the floor like it held answers. The moment the receptionist saw their vests, her posture changed. "Can I help you?" she asked, already reaching for the phone at her desk without making it obvious. "We're here with the woman brought in by EMS," Mason said, calm, clear. "Lena Harper. She has a 6-year-old with her. We're not family. We just want to make sure the kid isn't separated from his mom." The receptionist's eyes flicked to the no weapons sign, then back to their hands. "Sir, you can't. We're not going past this desk," Sky said. "We're not asking for medical information, just the kid. That's it." A security guard approached, heavy belt, tired eyes. "Problem?" "No problem," Mason said, turning his palms out. "We're trying to prevent one." The security guard didn't soften. "Vests have to come off." Mason didn't argue. He unzipped, slid his vest off, and folded it over his arm. Sky did the same. Underneath, they looked like ordinary people in worn jackets and road boots. The guard nodded once. "Sit. Don't wander." Mason sat. Sky stayed standing for a second, scanning the hallways. Through the glass doors to the left, Deputy Rourke walked in like he'd been invited. No hurry, no stress. Badge shining. He spoke to the triage nurse with an easy smile, like he was a familiar nuisance they had to tolerate. Mason watched the nurse's face change. She straightened, then glanced toward the waiting room as if she'd been told to look for someone. Rourke followed her gaze and saw Mason. His smile didn't break. "Go." Mason kept his voice flat. "We're go." Mason kept his voice flat. "We're here for the child." Rourke glanced toward the hallway. "Child's in my custody now." Sky's head tilted. "On what authority?" Rourke's eyes slid to her. "My badge." "That's not authority," Sky said. "That's jewelry." Rourke's jaw tightened, then he smiled again, like he was amused by a child's attitude. His mother's unfit right now. She can barely breathe. He needs a responsible adult. "And you think that's you?" Mason said. Rourke leaned down slightly, voice soft enough that only they heard. "I know what you're doing. You want to play savior. Then you'll tell everyone how the big bad deputy tried to hurt the poor little kid. Cute story. Won't hold." Mason didn't move. "Where is Eli?" Rourke's eyes stayed on Mason's. "In a room, safe, away from strangers." "Then we'll sit right here," Mason said, not moving, not causing a scene. Rourke's smile faded for a moment, irritation flickering. He wanted them to chase, to bark, to touch him so he could make it a charge. Sitting quietly wasn't the movie he needed. He straightened. "You're interfering with an investigation." Sky's voice stayed calm. "What's the case number?" Rourke's eyes flashed. "You don't get to ask me that." Mason leaned back, relaxed on purpose. "Then you don't get to call it an investigation." Rourke stared at him a second longer, then turned and walked toward the hallway again, shoulders tight with control. Sky waited until he was out of earshot. "He's going to take Eli when they move her," Mason nodded. "That's why we stay visible." Skye pulled out her phone and started typing. "I'm calling Rita." Mason didn't ask who. He already knew. Every club had someone who handled paperwork the way other people handled knives. Skye stepped away and spoke low. Mason watched the hall. A nurse pushed through double doors with a cart, eyes darting as she passed the waiting area. Another security guard took position by the hallway entrance, watching Rourke, watching Mason, watching everything like the building itself was bracing. 10 minutes passed like an hour. Then, the female EMT from the motel appeared, moving fast, ponytail bouncing as she scanned the waiting room. She spotted Mason and Skye and came over. "You followed," she said, not accusing, observing. "We kept distance," Mason replied. She lowered her voice. "Your patient's in respiratory. They're doing imaging, labs, the whole thing. She's worse than she looked." Mason's stomach tightened. "And the kid?" The EMT's expression hardened. "That deputy tried to tell us the kid belongs with him. I told him no. Hospital social worker got involved." "Where's Eli right now?" Mason asked again. "In a consult room off triage," she said. "Social worker's with him. He keeps asking for his mom." Skye returned, phone still in her hand. "Rita says do not touch him, do not raise your voice. She's sending us a text with exact language to use, and she wants names, everyone's names." Mason nodded. "Good." A door down the hall opened. The triage nurse stepped out with a woman in a gray blazer and a hospital badge, social work. Between them, Eli walked like he was trying to take up as little space as possible. His hands clutched the crumpled paper bag. The soup was gone cold now, but he held it anyway. Eli spotted Mason and stopped dead. Relief flooded his face for half a second. Then fear snapped over it like a lid, because Rourke appeared behind them, one hand light on Eli's shoulder. "You two," Rourke called, loud enough for the waiting room to hear. "You need to leave, now." The social worker's eyes flicked toward Mason, then to the security guard, then back to Rourke. She looked like she'd been dropped into the middle of a situation nobody had briefed her on. Mason stood slowly, keeping his hands visible. "We're leaving the moment Eli is with his mom or a neutral caregiver." Rourke laughed. "Neutral? You?" Skye stepped up beside Mason. "We're not asking you to give him to us. We're asking you not to take him." The social worker raised a hand. "Okay, everyone calm down. I'm Ms. Henson. This child's mother is in active treatment. We're determining temporary arrangements." Rourke's smile returned full. "Great, I'm temporary arrangement." Ms. Henson hesitated. "Sir, are you family?" Rourke didn't blink. "I'm legal guardian." Mason felt Skye's body stiffen. Ms. Henson looked at Rourke. "Do you have documentation?" Rourke's smile wavered. "It's complicated." Skye spoke before Ms. Henson could fold. "Then you're not a guardian. You're a deputy who knows them." Rourke's eyes snapped to Skye. "Watch yourself." Ms. Henson straightened. "Deputy, I need paperwork. A court order, guardianship papers, something." Rourke leaned in, voice lower but still sharp. "I don't need to show you anything. You do what I say and the hospital stays friendly with the sheriff's office." The waiting room got quieter. People were listening now. Mason didn't move. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked at Eli. Eli's eyes were locked on Mason's face like he was trying to read if the adults were going to let him down again. Mason spoke gently, not to Rourke, not to Ms. Henson, to Eli. "You okay, kid?" Eli swallowed. "Can I see my mom?" Ms. Henson's face softened. "Sweetie, she's getting help right now. We'll let you see her as soon as it's safe." Rourke tightened his grip on Eli's shoulder, small pressure that made Eli's body flinch even though Rourke never stopped smiling. Mason saw it. Ms. Henson saw it too. Skye's phone buzzed. She glanced down, then read from the message without making it theatrical. "Hospital policy. A minor cannot be removed by law enforcement without a court order or immediate documented danger. If law enforcement insists, request the on-duty supervisor, patient advocate, and document the interaction." Ms. Henson blinked. "Who's that from?" "Our attorney," Skye said. "And she's right." Rourke's smile thinned. "You brought an attorney into this?" Mason's voice stayed level. "You brought your badge." The security guard from earlier stepped closer. "Deputy, what's going on?" Rourke turned toward him, charming again. "Just getting the child to a safe place." The guard looked at Ms. Henson. "Is that true?" Ms. Henson took a breath. We do not have documentation that he's a guardian. The mother is in treatment. The child should remain under hospital supervision until we can confirm a safe discharge plan." Rourke's eyes went cold. "You're choosing them over law enforcement?" Ms. Henson didn't flinch this time. "I'm choosing policy." Rourke stared at her, then at Mason, and his face said clearly, "I will remember this." He let go of Eli's shoulder and stepped back like a man making a gracious concession. "Fine. Keep him. I'll get paperwork." Sky's voice stayed calm. "From where?" "A judge." Rourke's eyes flickered, just a beat, like the word hit too close to something real. Then his smile returned. "From where I need." He turned to Eli, bending down with fake warmth. "Hey, buddy, I'll be back soon. Stay put." Eli didn't answer. He just moved one step closer to Ms. Henson, away from Rourke without looking like he was doing it. Rourke straightened and walked toward the exit, slow, letting everyone see his badge, letting everyone feel he was still in control. When he hit the doors, he paused and looked back at Mason. "You can't stay in this town," he said, voice quiet but carrying. Mason held his gaze. "We're not staying. We're finishing what we started." Rourke left. The waiting room exhaled like it had been holding its breath. Ms. Henson crouched slightly to Eli's level. "Eli, I'm going to sit you in my office for a few minutes, okay? We'll get you water. We'll get you a blanket. And I'm going to check on your mom." Eli nodded, then glanced at Mason. "Are you leaving?" Mason kept his voice soft. "We're right here. We're not going anywhere." Eli's shoulders dropped just a little. As Ms. Henson led him away, the woman from the diner appeared near the coffee kiosk at the far end of the lobby. Same stillness, same unreadable face. She didn't approach. She just watched the hallway Rourke had used, then looked at Mason like she was measuring him, and finally slipped a small card onto the counter near the sugar packets. Then she walked out without a sound. Mason waited 3 seconds, then crossed to the kiosk like he was just getting coffee. He picked up the card. No name on the front, just a seal in the corner and a number on the back. Sky came beside him. "Who is she?" Mason turned the card over once more, then slid it into his pocket without answering. Because the bigger problem wasn't the mysterious woman. The bigger problem was Deputy Rourke, heading back into the night to find paperwork that could make Eli disappear legally. Ms. Henson's office was a windowless box behind triage with a desk, 2 chairs, and a plastic bin full of donated toys that looked like they'd been cleaned 1,000 times. She sat Eli on the chair closest to the wall, wrapped a thin hospital blanket around his shoulders, and handed him a cup of water with a lid. Eli didn't drink. He held the cup in both hands like it was something he had to be careful not to spill, and kept staring at the door. "Can I see her?" he asked again. Ms. Henson kept her voice steady. "Not yet, but I'm checking, every few minutes." Mason stayed in the hallway outside the office with Sky, close enough that Eli could see them if the door opened, far enough that they weren't crowding staff. They didn't sit. Sitting felt like surrender. From behind the double doors, the ER sounded like controlled chaos, wheels on linoleum, clipped voices, alarms that started and stopped. And every time a staff member passed, their eyes flicked to the vests folded over Mason's and Sky's arms, like the fabric itself was a problem. Sky leaned close. "You calling the number?" Mason pulled the card out under his palm. No name, just that seal and the phone number. He didn't recognize the seal, but it felt official in the way it was printed. Clean, sharp, not a business card from a diner. He stepped toward a quiet corner by the vending machines and dialed. 1 ring. 2. A woman answered, voice professional, no warmth and no impatience. "Office." Mason didn't give her a story. "I was given this number at County Hospital. A deputy is trying to remove a child from hospital care without documentation. Mother is in active respiratory treatment. Social worker is involved." Silence, a beat too long. Then, softer. "Is the deputy named Rourke?" Mason's eyes narrowed. "Yes." Another small pause. "Do not confront him. Do not touch him. Keep the child in the hospital's custody. Make sure the hospital documents everything. Ask for the nursing supervisor and the patient advocate." "Who are you?" Mason asked. "Someone who doesn't want that child to disappear," the voice replied. "If Rourke returns with paperwork, read it carefully. If it's not signed by a judge with jurisdiction, it's not worth the paper. If it is signed, ask for the court clerk's confirmation number. Mason looked through the glass toward the entrance. He left to get paperwork. I know, the voice said, and there was nothing mystical about it, just certainty. And he'll be back soon. Then the line clicked dead. Skye watched him put the phone away. That didn't sound like a friend. No, Mason said. It sounded like somebody who's been waiting. They weren't alone in the lobby anymore. 2 men from the club had walked in 5 minutes earlier, vests off, hair tucked under ball caps, faces neutral. They didn't speak to Mason unless spoken to. They sat apart like strangers, watching the hallway and the doors, and the waiting room's tension spread anyway. The triage nurse stepped out, scanned, then pointed at Mason with 2 fingers. Sir, the doctor needs to speak with you. Mason followed her down the hall, Skye half a step behind. They stopped at a curtain. A young ER doctor pulled it aside enough to talk without turning it into a show. His eyes were tired, his voice careful. Lena Harper came in respiratory distress, he said. Her oxygen saturation dropped again. We think severe pneumonia, possible sepsis. Mason's gut tightened. Is she awake? Barely, the doctor said. She's confused and she's struggling to breathe. We're trying high-flow oxygen. If she doesn't improve, we may need to intubate. Skye's hands clenched, then relaxed. Her son is here. I know, the doctor said. Social work told me. That's actually why I'm talking to you. Mason waited. We need consent if she becomes unable to consent, the doctor continued. We need next of kin. Emergency consent is allowed if it's life-threatening, but it gets questioned later, and law enforcement is already circling. Deputy Rourke, Mason said. The doctor's mouth tightened in a way that said he'd dealt with that name before. Yes, he's asking for access. He's asking who's with her. He's asking where the child is. Is he family? Skye asked. No, the doctor said. He claims he's the guardian. He isn't, Mason replied. The doctor looked between them. Then tell social work, and tell them fast. Because if he gets into a room when she can't speak clearly, he'll make her agree to anything. Mason nodded once. Can we see her? The doctor shook his head. Not right now, but I'll tell you something. She keeps asking for her son, even when she can't form full sentences. Mason swallowed the anger that rose hot and useless. Keep them together. We're trying, the doctor said. But policy is one thing. Pressure is another. He pulled the curtain closed again, and Mason turned back toward Ms. Henson's office with a new weight in his chest. Eli was still in the chair, blanket wrapped tight, cup untouched. Ms. Henson sat beside him now, talking softly. Eli's face lifted when he saw Mason. Is she okay? He asked. Mason didn't lie big. He lied small, the kind you use to keep a kid from breaking. She's getting help. Eli's eyes went glossy. Can I give her the blanket? Ms. Henson reached out and squeezed Eli's shoulder. We can bring her another one. This one stays with you. Eli nodded, then whispered, He's coming back. Skye crouched slightly to his level, not smiling, not putting cheer where it didn't belong. Who's coming back? Eli's mouth tightened. Mike, or the deputy. They always come back. Mason felt the air shift before the doors even opened. The entrance slid apart and Deputy Rourke walked in carrying a folder like it was a weapon nobody could take from him. 2 uniformed deputies came behind him. One was the older deputy from the motel, face tight like he'd rather be anywhere else, and the other was younger, eyes glued to Rourke like he was learning what loyalty looked like. Rourke didn't scan the room this time. He walked straight to Ms. Henson's office door. I've got it, he said, voice loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Paperwork's done. Ms. Henson stood. Deputy, I told you, we need documentation. Rourke flipped the folder open and shoved the first page toward her. Here, emergency protective custody, signed. Mason stepped closer, but not into the doorway. Let me see it. Rourke didn't look at him. You're not part of this. Skye's voice stayed calm. We're witnesses. Rourke finally turned his head, smile thin. Witnesses to what? You buying soup? Cute. Mason didn't bite. He kept his hands down. Show the signature. Ms. Henson's eyes moved across the page, lips parting. This is not a juvenile judge. This is a magistrate. Rourke's smile stayed. Still a judge, Ms. Henson swallowed. Not for this. This isn't. Rourke leaned in, lowering his voice like he was doing her a favor. Ms. Henson, do you want to be the reason a child stays with an unstable mother in a biker gang instead of going someplace safe? Because that's how it'll be written. Eli shrank into the chair behind her, blanket pulled tighter. Mason heard it, how Rourke used words like knives without ever raising his hand. Skye stepped to the side and lifted her phone. We need the clerk confirmation number. Rourke's eyes snapped to her. Put that away. Skye didn't move. Confirmation number. The older deputy cleared his throat. Rourke, maybe we do this by the book. Rourke's smile didn't reach him. This is the book. Mason addressed Ms. Henson, not Rourke. Ask for the nursing supervisor and patient advocate, right now. Ms. Henson's face tightened. She nodded and turned toward the hallway, raising her voice. I need Supervisor Reynolds and patient advocate on duty, please, now. Rourke's smile slipped into irritation. You don't get to stall. Ms. Henson faced him. I do. This paperwork doesn't match our requirements, and this child is under hospital supervision until it does. Rourke's jaw flexed. He looked past her to Eli and softened his voice into something almost kind. Hey, buddy, let's go. We're getting you somewhere warm. Eli didn't move. His eyes were locked on Mason. Mason kept his voice steady. Eli stays here. Rourke's gaze hardened. You don't get to give orders. Mason didn't change his tone. And you don't get to take a child without the right authority. For a second, it looked like Rourke might push past Ms. Henson anyway, just to prove he could. Then the nursing supervisor arrived, a woman in dark scrubs with a badge and a posture that said she'd shut down 1,000 arguments in her career. The patient advocate came with her, older, carrying a clipboard like it was a shield. What's happening? The supervisor asked. Rourke put on his best official voice. Emergency custody order. I'm taking the child. The supervisor looked at Ms. Henson. Is that correct? Ms. Henson handed over the paper. It's signed by a magistrate, not juvenile court, and it doesn't list the immediate danger. It's vague. The supervisor's eyes moved fast across the page. Then she looked at the patient advocate. Call legal, right now, and call the clerk to verify. Rourke's smile tightened. You're refusing a judge's order? I'm verifying it, the supervisor said. That's not refusal. Rourke leaned closer to her. I can make your hospital's life difficult. The supervisor didn't blink. And I can make yours documented. The patient advocate stepped aside and started dialing. Skye remained still, phone recording low by her thigh. Rourke's eyes flicked to Skye's phone again, then to the people in the waiting room watching, then to the older deputy whose shoulders were slumped with discomfort. He recalculated in real time. Fine, Rourke said, voice suddenly smooth. Verify. I'll wait. But he didn't step away from the doorway. He stayed planted like a guard. Behind the curtain down the hall, an alarm beeped faster, then stopped, then started again. A nurse hurried past with a focused face, not looking at any of them. The doctor from earlier appeared at the end of the corridor, eyes tight. He walked to the supervisor and spoke low, but Mason caught enough. She's crashing, the doctor said. We're intubating. Eli heard the word even if he didn't understand it. His face pinched, fear rising. Ms. Henson crouched again, voice soft. Eli, your mom is getting strong medicine. She can't talk right now, but she wants you safe. Eli's lips trembled. I want her. Skye's voice softened for the first time. We know. The patient advocate returned, phone still at his ear, eyes narrowed. Clerk says there is no emergency custody filed under Lena Harper's case. No record, the supervisor turned to Rourke. Deputy, this document is not verified. You are not removing this child. Rourke's smile flickered, something sharp underneath. It will be verified. Not tonight, the supervisor said. Rourke stared at her like he wanted to burn the moment into memory. Then he looked at Eli again, and his voice dropped to a private threat wrapped in gentleness. Buddy, he said, I'll be back. Eli didn't answer. He just pulled the blanket higher. Rourke tucked the folder under his arm and stepped back like a man choosing peace. Have it your way, he said, and walked out with his deputies. The older deputy lingered half a second, eyes meeting Mason's, a tired apology in them, then followed. When the doors closed, the room exhaled again. Ms. Henson's knees looked like they might give, but she stayed upright. The supervisor looked at Mason and Skye. "You need to understand," she said, voice firm but not unkind. "You can't be in staff areas. You can't threaten anyone. But if you saw him touch that child or that woman, anything, you tell me, not security, me." Mason nodded once. He already did. Sky's phone lowered. "We have it." The supervisor's eyes tightened. "Good." Ms. Henson guided Eli back into the chair. Eli's face was wet now, tears silent, like he didn't want adults to notice. Mason stood in the doorway and kept his voice low. "Eli, listen to Ms. Henson. Stay here. Drink water. We're outside." Eli stared at him through the tears. "Promise?" Mason didn't hesitate. "Promise." Down the hall, the beeping from behind the curtain shifted again, and the sound of hurried footsteps got sharper, faster. But for this moment, the child stayed in a hospital office with a blanket around his shoulders, and the man with the badge walked out empty-handed. For 20 minutes after Rourke left, the hospital felt almost normal again. Almost. The supervisor went back to her unit. The patient advocate disappeared into the admin wing with a clipboard full of notes. Ms. Henson stayed in her office with Eli, trying to keep a 6-year-old steady while machines decided what happened to his mother. Mason and Sky stood outside the door like sentries who refused to look like sentries. Then the pressure rolled in. It started with the phones. The triage nurse's desk phone rang once, twice, then again before she could finish the first call. A receptionist on the admin side picked up, listened, and her face tightened. Security got called to the lobby again, not because anyone was fighting, but because the building could feel the mood shifting. A man in scrubs walked by, muttered, "Sheriff's office is blowing up the lines," and kept moving like he shouldn't have said it. Sky watched the entrance. "He's setting the narrative." Mason didn't answer. He didn't need to. He could already see it happening in the way strangers' eyes changed when they looked at them now, as if two people buying soup had turned into two people who belonged on a warning poster. The automatic doors opened and a group came in together. 3 men in work jackets, a woman with her hair tight in a bun, a teenager filming with his phone held high like a torch. They weren't staff. They weren't family. They stopped when they saw Mason and Sky. One of the men pointed at them. "That them?" The teenager's camera swung toward Mason's face. Sky stepped half a pace forward, calm. "Stop filming the child." "We're in a public lobby," the woman snapped. Ms. Henson's office door cracked open behind them as if she'd heard the voices. Eli's small face appeared for 1 second, eyes wide, then vanished again as Ms. Henson pulled him back inside. Mason kept his voice low, controlled. "There's a sick woman in back and a kid in that room. You want to help?" "Lower your voice." The man in the work jacket scoffed. "We saw the post, sheriff's page, said a biker crew followed a woman and her kid from a diner. Said y'all are interfering with law enforcement." Sky's eyes went colder. "You believe everything you scroll?" The teenager smiled and leaned in, camera still up. "Say something for the video." Mason looked at the phone, then at the kid's office door. "Put it down." "No," the teenager said, grin sharpening. "Make me." Sky exhaled through her nose, steadying herself. Mason raised his hands, palms open, and took one small step toward the teenager, slow enough it couldn't be framed as a lunge. That was all it took. The man in the jacket moved to block him, chest out. "Back off!" Security came fast this time, 2 guards, not 1. The lead guard lifted his hands and planted himself between them like a wall. "Everyone needs to calm down." Mason didn't change his tone. "We are calm. They're filming a minor." The woman with the bun snapped. "We're citizens. We have a right to know what's happening in our hospital." The guard turned on her. "Ma'am, you need to leave." "We got family here," the man lied, and the teenager's camera swung to the guard now, hungry for conflict. Sky glanced at Mason, quick. "If we push, he wins." Mason nodded once. He stepped back, letting security do what security was paid to do. The crowd grumbled as they were escorted toward the doors, but not before the teenager called out loud enough for half the lobby to hear. "Y'all kidnapped that kid from the diner?" Mason didn't answer. Silence was safer than a sentence cut into a headline. As the doors shut, Sky's phone buzzed again. She checked it, then turned the screen so Mason could see. A local Facebook page, a screenshot of the sheriff's office post. The wording was slick. Deputy responding to report of suspicious bikers harassing a vulnerable mother and child. Please contact the sheriff's office with any information. No names, no details, just enough to light a fuse. Sky's jaw tightened. He's painting us as predators. Mason's face stayed flat. He's painting Eli as evidence. Ms. Henson's office door opened again. She stepped out, closing it behind her so the voices in the lobby couldn't reach the kid. Her eyes looked tired now, the way people look when they realize the problem isn't paperwork anymore. We have an issue. Mason didn't move closer. Tell me. The ER doc says Lena is intubated, Ms. Henson said quietly. She's sedated. She can't speak. She can't make decisions. Sky's hands clenched once. Is she stable? Not yet, Ms. Henson replied. They're moving her to ICU, and, she hesitated, then forced it out. The deputy called and told the ICU charge nurse that he is Lena's guardian. He asked what room she'll be in. Mason's throat tightened. He's not getting near her. I can put a restricted visitor note, Ms. Henson said. But he's law enforcement. He can push. He can intimidate staff. He's already doing it. Sky stepped closer, voice controlled but urgent. Who is Lena's next of kin? Ms. Henson shook her head. She listed nobody. Mason felt the name on the wristband again like a weight. Harper. He kept his face neutral. Can you list an emergency contact now? Ms. Henson's eyes narrowed. Only if she's awake enough. Sky lowered her voice. Then we need someone with legal authority to keep Rourke away from both of them. Ms. Henson swallowed. That means a judge. Mason thought of the card in his pocket, the seal, the number, the voice that had known Rourke would come back. He didn't pull the card out. Not yet. He didn't know who that voice belonged to, and he wasn't going to hand a child over to mystery either, but he could use it like a lever. Put the restricted note, Mason said, and log that he tried to remove Eli with unverified paperwork. I already documented it, Ms. Henson replied. The supervisor documented it. Patient advocate documented it. But documentation doesn't stop a man who wants control. Eli's voice came faint through the door. Ms. Henson? She turned, softer. I'm here, sweetheart. The door opened a crack. Eli stood in the blanket like it was armor, the water cup still untouched. His eyes tracked the lobby as if he was counting enemies. Is he outside? Eli whispered. Mason's chest tightened. Who? Eli swallowed. Deputy. Or Mike. Sky's voice stayed gentle. Not right now. Eli's eyes didn't relax. They always come when she sleeps. Ms. Henson crouched to his level. Eli, your mom is in a room where doctors are helping her breathe. You're safe here. Eli shook his head, fast. He can take me. Not from this office, Ms. Henson said, trying to sound certain. Eli's gaze flicked to Mason. You promised. Mason met his eyes. I'm still here. Eli nodded once like he was accepting a deal he hated. Then he looked down at the crumpled paper bag in his hands. The soup is cold. Sky's face softened. We'll get you another one. Eli didn't smile. He just whispered, I didn't want soup. I wanted her to eat. Ms. Henson's throat worked. I know. She guided him back inside and closed the door again. Mason stood still for a second, letting the words settle. A kid shouldn't have to think like that. A kid shouldn't have to choose what kind of loss to prevent. Sky stepped beside him. We're losing the building. He looked around. More eyes now. A man pretending to read a pamphlet while filming with his phone angled low. A woman whispering to another, both looking at Mason's boots like boots made you guilty. Security watching them like they were waiting for a reason. The hospital didn't want a scandal. That meant they didn't want the truth either, not if the truth was loud. Mason lowered his voice. We keep calm. We keep Eli inside. We keep a paper trail, and we find someone above Rourke. Sky nodded once. The card. Mason didn't answer, but his hand touched his pocket. Before he could move, the older deputy from the motel stepped through the doors. Alone this time. No swagger, no smile. He looked around like he knew he shouldn't be seen talking to them, then walked straight past the triage desk as if he belonged, stopping near Mason without making it obvious. His voice was low. You two need to understand what you stepped into. Mason didn't move. We understand enough. The deputy's eyes flicked to Ms. Henson's door. Rourke's not just a bully, he's connected. Sheriff likes him, county likes him. People here, they don't push back. Sky's voice stayed flat. Except tonight. The deputy's mouth tightened. Tonight's not done. Mason watched him carefully. Why are you telling us? The deputy hesitated, then answered like it hurt. Because that kid's scared the way kids get scared when it's not the first time. And because I heard Rourke on the phone outside, he said, if the hospital won't release him, we'll make them. Sky's spine went tight. How? The deputy looked away for half a beat, then back. Rumor, pressure, complaints. Claims you threatened staff, claims you're stalking. He'll make it toxic enough that the hospital decides the easiest solution is to hand the kid to law enforcement just to quiet the building. Mason's jaw flexed. That won't be legal. The deputy gave a tired half-smile. Legal and easy are different, Sky asked. Where is he now? The deputy's voice dropped even lower. Outside, in the lot, and he's not alone. Mason's gaze shifted toward the glass doors. 2 sheriff's units had pulled into the front lane. Not lights, not sirens, just presence. Rourke stood near them talking to a man in a clean jacket who looked like admin, not a deputy. And near the edge of the lot, a small cluster of people gathered, phones up, watching the entrance like they expected a show. Rourke turned his head and looked directly through the glass at Mason, and smiled. Sky's voice was quiet. He wants you to walk out to him. Mason didn't move. We don't give him the frame. The older deputy swallowed. He's going to come in. Mason's pocket felt heavier. He stepped away from the doors and into the corner by the vending machines again, shielding his phone with his body like he was just checking a message. He pulled out the card, stared at the seal, and dialed the number again. 1 ring. The same voice answered, immediate. Yes. He's here, Mason said. He's pressuring the hospital. He's got units outside. He's turning the lobby into a circus. A pause, then, stay inside. Tell the nursing supervisor to initiate restricted access protocols. Keep the child in a staff-only room. Do not let him near ICU. Mason kept his voice controlled. Who are you? The voice exhaled, the first hint of something human. Someone with the authority to end this if you don't ruin it. Mason's eyes narrowed. Authority like what? Like a signature that actually holds, the voice said. I'm sending someone into the hospital. When they identify themselves, you cooperate. Mason didn't move. Name. Silence. Then, quietly, you'll get names when the child is safe. The line went dead again. Sky watched him put the phone away. What did she say? Someone's coming, Mason said, and we don't ruin it. Sky's eyes flicked to Ms. Henson's door. Eli needs to stay out of sight. As if on cue, Ms. Henson cracked the door and whispered, We're moving him to a staff room deeper in. Too many eyes out here. Mason nodded once. Do it. Ms. Henson opened the door fully, and Eli stepped out wrapped in the blanket, clutching the cold bag. He looked smaller in the bright lobby than he had in the motel doorway, like the hospital's clean walls made his fear look out of place. Eli's eyes went straight to the glass doors. He saw the sheriff's units. He saw Rourke. His whole body stiffened. I don't want to go, he whispered. Sky crouched, voice low. This is safer, just for a little. Eli's eyes flicked to Mason. You coming? Mason didn't lie. I'm staying where you can see me. Eli nodded once, then let Ms. Henson take his hand. They started down the hall. Rourke chose that exact second to walk through the doors. He came in with a calm smile, carrying himself like he was the solution, not the problem. 2 deputies followed him, and the security guards straightened automatically as if his badge outranked the whole building. Rourke's eyes locked on Eli immediately. Hey, buddy, he called, warm enough to fool a stranger. Eli froze. Ms. Henson's grip tightened. Deputy, hospital's moving the child to a private area. Rourke's smile didn't change. No need. I'm here to take him. We've worked it out. The nursing supervisor appeared near the triage desk like she'd been waiting. Deputy, you are not taking him. Rourke lifted his hands, harmless. Supervisor, I'm not trying to fight you. I'm trying to help you. People are upset. You've got citizens filming. You've got complaints. You've got liability. I can remove the child and the bikers can leave. And your lobby goes quiet. Mason watched how clean Rourke made it sound. Like trading a child for silence was just management. The supervisor's voice stayed firm. "We are not releasing a minor to you without verified legal authority." Rourke's smile sharpened. "Then, verify this." He lifted the folder again, a new page on top, different formatting, cleaner, more official looking. Sky's jaw tightened. He forged it. Mason didn't answer. He watched the supervisor take the paper and read it. Her face didn't change, but her eyes narrowed. "This lists a judge." Rourke nodded. "That's right." Mason felt his chest tighten. If Rourke really had a judge, the ground shifted. Eli stared at the paper like it could decide his whole life. Ms. Henson whispered, "We can't." The supervisor held up a hand. "We still verify." Rourke's smile stayed. "Of course, verify." He stepped closer to Eli, slow, hands open, voice soft. "Come on, buddy." For the first time since the diner, he moved without thinking. He yanked his hand out of Ms. Henson's grip and bolted, straight past Rourke, not toward the doors, but down the hall, away from everyone. "Eli!" Ms. Henson shouted. Rourke's head snapped, and for a split second, his smile vanished completely. Sky took one step as if to run after him, then stopped herself, because running would turn the lobby into exactly the chaos Rourke wanted. Mason didn't run either. He walked fast, controlled, cutting down the hall with purpose, eyes scanning for the small blanket-wrapped figure disappearing around a corner. Behind him, he could hear voices rising, security shifting, the supervisor calling for someone to block doors. Eli's sneakers slapped the floor, frantic. He rounded another corner toward the ICU wing, heading for the only place his mind knew: his mom. Mason caught sight of him just as Eli skidded near a doorway marked "Staff Only." A nurse stepped out, startled, and Eli tried to slip past her. "Sweetheart, you can't," she started. Eli's voice cracked. "That's my mom." Mason reached him then, not grabbing him, not tackling him, just dropping to one knee so he was level and close enough to block the path without touching. "Eli," Mason said steady. "Listen to me." Eli's chest heaved. Tears stood in his eyes. "He's gonna take me." "I won't let him," Mason said. Eli shook his head fast. "You can't stop him." Mason kept his voice low, controlled, like the calm was a rope Eli could hold on to. "We can. But not like that. Not by you running into ICU. That gets you grabbed. That gets you separated." Eli's lip trembled. "I just want to see her." Mason nodded once. "We'll get you to her when it's safe. Right now you come with me, and you stay behind staff doors where cameras can't make you into a story." Eli's eyes searched his face like he was deciding if promises were real. Mason didn't blink. "Right now." Eli's shoulders sagged, surrendering to something he hated. He nodded. Mason stood slowly, keeping his body between Eli and the open hallway, and guided him back toward the staff room without grabbing his hand. Just positioning. Just presence. At the far end of the corridor, Rourke's voice echoed closer now, still smooth, still in control, calling out, "Eli, buddy, come back here. Nobody's mad." Eli flinched at the sound, and Mason kept walking, steady, until the staff door clicked shut behind them. The staff door shut with a soft click that sounded too small for how much it mattered. Inside, the air changed. No lobby noise, no phones ringing, no strangers with cameras. Just the faint hum of vents and the smell of microwaved coffee. A cramped break area, a row of lockers, a bulletin board with shift schedules, a stack of disposable cups. Eli stood frozen in the middle of it, blanket hanging off his shoulders like it didn't know how to sit on someone so small. His eyes flicked to every corner, waiting for a uniform to appear. Mason stayed between Eli and the door without touching him. "Breathe," he said, low. "You're not trapped. You're protected." Eli shook his head fast. "He can come in." A nurse, young, hair tucked under a cap, hovered near the lockers, uncertain. "Sir, you can't be back here." Mason kept his voice calm. He ran. "We stopped him from going into ICU. We're not here to make trouble." The nurse's eyes jumped to Eli's face and softened, then hardened again when she remembered policy. "Security's going to be angry," Sky spoke quietly. "Security should be angry at the deputy trying to take a kid with fake paperwork." The nurse swallowed. "He said you were—" She stopped herself. Dangerous? Mason finished for her. She didn't answer. Outside the door, footsteps approached, quick and heavy. A knock hit the metal frame. "Open up," a man's voice said. Security. Eli flinched so hard the blanket slid. He grabbed it like it was a life jacket. Mason stepped closer to the door, but still didn't touch it. He spoke through it. "Child is safe." He ran. "He's not being taken anywhere until paperwork is verified." The door handle rattled. "Sir," security called again, sharper now. "Open the door." Sky leaned near Mason's shoulder. "If they force it, they frame it as us hiding him." Mason nodded once. "We open it, calm, hands visible." He pulled the door open slowly. 2 security guards filled the doorway, and behind them stood Deputy Rourke, still smiling, still clean, still carrying himself like the building belonged to him. The smile turned warmer when he saw Eli. "There you are," Rourke said, voice soft like he was talking to a lost puppy. "Buddy, you scared everybody." Eli didn't move. His eyes locked on Mason's face, pleading without sound. The lead guard looked at Mason. "You can't be back here." Mason kept his hands down and open. He bolted toward ICU. "We kept him from running into patient areas." Rourke sighed like a patient adult. "And then you took him behind a locked door." Sky's voice stayed even. "We kept him out of a lobby full of people filming him." Rourke turned his head toward her, smile still there. "How noble." The second guard's eyes flicked to Eli. "Kid, you okay?" Eli's lips moved, but no words came out. Rourke stepped forward, as if to walk right past the guards into the room. The lead guard shifted to block him reflexively, then remembered the badge and hesitated. Mason spoke carefully. "Deputy, you're not entering staff space without permission." Rourke's smile thinned. "You're not giving orders in a hospital, Mason." Mason didn't raise his voice. "Then do it by the book. Bring the supervisor. Bring the patient advocate. Verify your papers." Rourke lifted the folder slightly. "Already did." Sky's eyes didn't blink, and it didn't verify. Rourke held her gaze for a beat, and for a fraction of a second, his smile slipped, irritation showing through the charm. Then it came back. "Hospital's on edge," he said, addressing the guards like Mason, and Sky weren't even there. "People are filming. They're saying these 2 followed a vulnerable mother and child. They're saying the hospital is letting a biker gang take over." The lead guard's jaw tightened. "We are not letting anyone take over." "Exactly," Rourke said. "So you remove the bikers, and you release the child to me. Problem solved." Mason heard how smooth it was, how tempting it sounded if your only goal was quiet. Sky said, "You want quiet, not safety." Rourke's smile didn't move. "I want order." The nurse who'd been inside with them took a step forward, voice shaking slightly. "Deputy?" He ran. They didn't drag him. They stopped him from going into ICU. Rourke looked at her like she'd betrayed him personally. "Thank you for your opinion." Then he turned back to Eli and lowered himself a little, making his posture smaller, friendlier. "Hey, buddy, come with me. You can hold my hand. You'll be safe." Eli pressed closer to Mason without touching him, the smallest movement, like a magnet choosing the less frightening metal. Rourke's eyes flicked up and the smile stayed, but it went colder. "See?" he said, standing again. "He's afraid. He needs stability." "He's afraid of you," Sky said. The lead guard cleared his throat, uncomfortable. "Sir, ma'am, I'm going to need you to step out of this area, now." Mason nodded once. "We will. But Eli stays with hospital staff." Rourke's voice stayed pleasant. "Hospital staff doesn't want him. They want liability gone. That's what they want." Mason didn't argue in circles. He looked at the nurse. "Who's in charge on this floor right now?" The nurse hesitated, then nodded toward the hall. "Supervisor Reynolds." Sky's phone buzzed. She glanced down, then looked up at Mason. "Rita says get supervisor on record. Ask for law to confirm authenticity. Do not refuse a valid order, but do not surrender to a fake one." Mason nodded. "Bring Reynolds here." Rourke's smile widened like he'd already won. "Sure, bring her. She'll tell you the same thing." The lead guard spoke into his radio, clipped and tense. "Supervisor Reynolds to staff hall near triage, now." While they waited, Rourke drifted his eyes over Eli again. "You know," he said conversationally, "kids run when they're confused. They run when adults fill their heads with nonsense. Sky's voice went colder. Stop talking to him. Rourke's eyes turned to her. Make me. He said it softly, like the teenager in the lobby had, like the whole county ran on that question. Footsteps approached. Supervisor Reynolds appeared, jaw set, moving with the controlled speed of someone who'd already dealt with too many calls tonight. Patient advocate Jacobs came with her, clipboard in hand. Behind them, a hospital administrator in a clean blazer tagged along, eyes sharp and anxious. Reynolds took in the scene in 2 seconds. Why is security in a staff hallway? Rourke lifted the folder. Because these two are hiding a minor from lawful protective custody. Mason's voice stayed calm. He ran from the deputy. We kept him from running into ICU. The deputy has presented unverified paperwork twice. Jacobs looked at Rourke. We already confirmed the previous document had no filing. Rourke's smile didn't move. That was earlier. This is now. He flipped to a page and handed it out like it was inevitable. Reynolds took it, scanned, and her eyes narrowed. This lists a judge. Rourke nodded. Yes. Jacobs leaned in. We need verification. Rourke's tone sharpened slightly. You're verifying a court order while a child is in distress, Sky answered evenly. You're waving paper while a mother is sedated and can't consent. The administrator finally spoke, voice tight. This is turning into a spectacle. Rourke turned toward him, sympathetic. It doesn't have to. Release the child, remove the bikers, and you don't have cameras on your lobby. Mason watched the administrator's eyes flick to the hallway, to Eli, to the security guards. He could see the calculation. Easiest path, least noise. Reynolds held the paper up. I'm verifying. Rourke's jaw flexed. If you delay and something happens to him, that's on you. Eli's breath hitched at the words, something happens, like he'd heard them before in other mouths. Mason crouched slightly, just enough to bring his voice closer to Eli's ear without leaning in. Don't listen to him, he said. Look at me. Eli's eyes flicked to Mason, then darted away again, terrified of making the deputy angry by ignoring him. Reynolds handed the paper to Jacobs. Call the clerk. Confirm the case number and signature. Jacobs nodded and stepped aside, dialing. Rourke smiled wider. Good. Confirm it. The confidence in his tone was the first thing that felt wrong. Most people threatened when they were cornered. Rourke sounded comfortable. Mason's eyes went to the folder in Rourke's hand. New page, cleaner formatting, different letterhead than before, like someone had printed it in a hurry but knew what official paper should look like. Sky's voice dropped to Mason. He's not bluffing. He's got help. Mason didn't answer. His hand brushed his pocket again, feeling the edge of the card. Eli whispered, barely audible. If he takes me, I won't come back. Sky's face tightened. Hey. Eli shook his head fast. They say I will. I don't. Mason kept his voice steady. You're not going anywhere without someone you trust seeing it happen. Eli's lips trembled. You can't stop them. Mason didn't promise what he couldn't control. We can make it hard. We can make it seen. Jacobs came back from the call, face tense. Clerk's office says the judge listed is in chambers tonight. They're not confirming over the phone. Rourke spread his hands. There you go. You can't verify, but you can't deny. Reynolds' eyes narrowed. That doesn't make it valid. The administrator exhaled sharply. We can't hold a child indefinitely because the clerk won't answer. Sky's voice stayed level. Then keep him with social work. That's literally their job. The administrator's eyes flicked to Sky like she was an inconvenience. We are trying to run a hospital. Rourke leaned in, voice gentle. Release him to law enforcement, and your hospital runs. Mason watched Reynolds. She didn't like it, but he could see the pressure folding around her. Not fear of Rourke, fear of chaos, fear of being the headline. Reynolds finally said, We will not release him from a staff area without a verified order. But, her eyes flicked to Mason and Sky, you two need to leave this hallway, now. Sky stiffened. If we leave, he takes him. Reynolds' voice went firm. You're escalating the situation by being here. If you refuse, security will escort you out and then the deputy will claim you resisted. It was a trap built out of policy. Mason exhaled slowly. We'll step out. Sky's eyes snapped to him. "Mason, we'll step out," he repeated, calm, to the supervisor. "But we're not leaving the building." Reynolds nodded once, relieved she got compliance. Rourke's smile brightened like a reward. "Smart choice." Mason looked at Eli. "Stay with Ms. Henson," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Stay with hospital staff. Do not go with anyone unless Ms. Henson is there." Eli nodded fast, eyes wet. Reynolds turned to the nurse. "Get Ms. Henson here." The nurse hurried off. Mason and Sky stepped out into the corridor, hands visible, moving slowly. Security shadowed them, making sure everyone could see the peaceful removal. Rourke stayed in the staff hall, just inside the doorway, still smiling as if he'd proven something. Sky whispered, teeth clenched, "We're handing him the kid." Mason didn't look at her. "Not if we watch the exit." They moved back toward the lobby. The closer they got, the more they heard it. Voices, phones, a dull roar of people who'd decided they were entitled to a story. The citizen crowd had grown, not huge, but enough. And enough cameras. Rourke wanted this outside, in the open, where any move looked like aggression. Mason and Sky stopped near the vending machines again, line of sight to the staff corridor and the main doors. Their two club guys across the lobby sat still, heads slightly lowered, watching everything without looking like they were watching. Minutes dragged. Then Ms. Henson appeared in the staff hallway entrance with Eli beside her. Eli's blanket was still wrapped tight. His face was pale now, eyes red. He clung to the cold paper bag like it was the last proof the diner happened. Reynolds stood with them, and behind them, Rourke, folder tucked under his arm, wearing patience like a weapon. Jacob spoke to Reynolds, voice low. "We still don't have verification." Reynolds' expression was tight. "We can't keep him in staff space all night with deputies circling," Sky whispered. "She's about to fold." Mason watched, still, controlled. Rourke stepped forward and said something that Mason couldn't hear, too quiet. Reynolds' posture shifted, a barely visible flinch. Then she nodded once, sharply, like she'd made a decision she hated. Reynolds turned to Ms. Henson. "Walk him to the front, released to the deputy's custody pending verification." Sky's whole body went rigid. "No." Mason didn't move yet. He watched for the exact reason. Ms. Henson's face went pale. "Supervisor, he tried to take him with fake paperwork." Reynolds' voice stayed firm, brittle. "We have no other option with the pressure in this building." Rourke's smile widened, and for a split second, it was the only honest thing on his face. Eli's head snapped toward Mason. Mason stepped forward one pace, calm, voice carrying just enough. "Supervisor Reynolds, put that decision in writing, right now." Reynolds hesitated. Rourke's voice was smooth. "No need. We're not doing paperwork in the hallway." Mason didn't look at Rourke. He looked at Reynolds. "In writing. With your name. With a timestamp. That you're releasing a child to an unverified order while his mother is sedated." The waiting room quieted slightly. People loved drama until it turned into liability. Reynolds swallowed. "Security." Before she could finish, a fire alarm chirped once, not the full building alarm, just a sharp, sudden beep that made heads turn. A moment later, another beep, and a different tone from somewhere deeper in the hospital, like a door alarm. Security guards shifted instinctively. One turned his head toward the corridor. Another looked toward the admin wing. The administrator took out his phone, suddenly focused elsewhere. Rourke didn't look confused at all. He stepped close to Ms. Henson, touched her elbow lightly like a guide, and said something too quiet to hear. Ms. Henson's eyes widened. Then Rourke slid his hand onto Eli's shoulder again, gentle pressure. Eli flinched. Mason took a step, but Sky caught his sleeve with 2 fingers, just enough. "If you grab him, we're the story." Mason's jaw flexed. He forced himself to stop. Rourke turned the moment into movement. He walked Eli not toward the main doors where cameras were, but toward a side corridor near radiology, an exit that led to the staff parking lot. Ms. Henson followed, torn, looking back at Reynolds as if begging for someone to stop it. Reynolds looked overwhelmed, already turning toward the alarm sound, the administrator speaking into his phone, security splitting their attention. It was engineered chaos. Just enough to blur consent, just enough to make people choose the easiest problem to solve. Mason moved fast without running, cutting through the lobby at an angle to keep eyes off him. Sky mirrored him. Their two club guys stood, quietly drifting into positions that gave them sightlines without forming a group. Mason reached the radiology corridor, just in time to see the back of Eli's blanket disappearing through a set of doors marked Authorized Personnel Only. Rourke was taking him into the staff parking route. Sky's voice was tight. "We can't go through that door." Mason's eyes locked on the small gap before the doors shut. "Then we go around." They hustled out the main entrance, moving with purpose but not panic, helmets in hand, boots hitting pavement. The cold slapped their faces. Across the lot, a sheriff's unit sat idling near the edge. Not Rourke's, a different one, positioned like a blocker. Mason's eyes snapped to the far side. A black SUV rolled slowly out from the staff exit lane, turning without hurry. Rourke behind the wheel. Eli in the passenger seat, blanket up to his chin, face pressed to the glass. Eli's eyes met Mason's for a split second. Then Rourke raised one hand in a casual wave, smiling through the windshield like he'd just picked up groceries, and the SUV turned onto the service road and disappeared into traffic. Sky's breath came out sharp. He took him. Mason stood still, forcing his body to stay controlled even while something violent rose in his chest. He pulled his phone out, opened the camera, and zoomed in on the taillights just as the SUV hit the street lamp glow. The plate came into focus for half a second. Enough. He snapped the photo. Then he turned, looked at Sky, and said low and steady, "Now we track smart. No hero moves. No mistakes." The cold hit harder outside the hospital, like the night was punishing them for losing control for even a second. Mason didn't chase the SUV. He didn't gun an engine. He stood on the sidewalk with Sky and forced his breathing to slow while his phone held the only clean thing they had, an image of Rourke's plate. Sky's voice shook with anger she was swallowing whole. He took him right out of a hospital. Mason zoomed in on the photo again, making sure it was sharp. He wanted a chase. He wanted a clip. He wanted us to be loud. "And now?" Sky asked. "Now we make him paperwork," Mason said. Their two guys from the club drifted out of the lobby doors a minute later, empty-handed, faces tight. No vests, no words. One of them nodded toward the lot. "Units are sitting on the corners," he murmured, "like they're waiting for you to make a mistake." Mason didn't look at the units. Looking was acknowledgement. "Get our bikes, check them first." Sky started toward her bike and stopped. She crouched, ran her hand along the rear brake line, and her face changed. "Mason," she said, quiet. He came to her side. A thin, wet sheen glinted under the parking lot light where there shouldn't have been any. Not a full cut, a nick, just enough to make a line fail when the pressure was high. Sky's jaw tightened. "They touched our bikes." Mason stared at it for a beat, anger rising. Then he pushed it down and spoke like a man reading a checklist. "Don't ride," Sky exhaled once, sharp. "We walk?" "We drive," Mason said. "Not our bikes, not tonight." One of their guys, Tank, didn't ask questions. He pointed with his chin. "Rental place by the highway, open late." Mason nodded. "You two stay near the hospital. Quiet. Watch. If Rourke comes back and tries anything with ICU or with Lena's chart, you record names, times, and who let him in." Tank's eyes narrowed. "He'll blame us." "Let him," Mason said. "Just don't give him a reason." Sky looked back through the glass doors. The lobby still had people inside, hungry for a story. Phones up, faces bright with righteousness. Eli's small body wasn't among them anymore. Sky's voice went thin. "Ms. Henson's gonna blame herself." Mason didn't answer. He was already moving. They cut through the lot on foot, not running, just purposeful. Sky called Rita first. No speaker, no drama. Rita's voice came tight and immediate. "Tell me you didn't chase." "We didn't," Sky said. "We have his plate." "Text it," Rita snapped, "and send me every recording you have, hospital hallway, lobby, anything with his voice." Mason sent the plate photo. Then he started listing names like he was building a case with his mouth. Supervisor Reynolds, patient advocate Jacobs, social worker Henson, EMT, female, first responder from Sunrise Motel call. Rita didn't interrupt. She let him lay the bricks. When he finished, she said, "Good. Now you do 3 things. 1, you go back inside and request the hospital preserve all footage, front lobby, staff corridor, radiology exit, staff parking, in writing. 2, you file a report with an agency that's not his sheriff's office, state police duty desk. And 3, you get witness statements, not stories, statements. Sky swallowed. He took a kid. Tonight. Then treat it like a kidnapping with a badge, Rita said. And if you touch him, you become the kidnapping. Mason's voice stayed flat. We won't touch him. Good, Rita said, because I'm moving. I'm calling the county clerk, I'm calling the DA's duty line, and I'm calling the hospital's legal counsel. If that paper he waved has a real signature, we'll confirm it. If it doesn't, we bury him with his own lies. Sky's eyes flicked to Mason. We can get the footage? You can request preservation, Rita answered. You can't demand a copy, but if the hospital's smart, they'll cooperate to protect themselves. Mason ended the call and immediately turned back toward the doors. Not to fight, to document. Inside, the lobby tension jumped as soon as people saw them re-enter. A man raised his phone like it was a weapon. A woman muttered something about gang. Security straightened. Mason didn't look at any of them. He walked straight to the triage desk and asked for the nursing supervisor, patient advocate, and hospital administrator. By name, not by title. Names made people accountable. Supervisor Reynolds appeared first, face drawn. You need to leave, she said, like she'd said it 100 times tonight. Mason held his hands open. I'm not here to argue. I'm here to request preservation of all surveillance footage related to Deputy Rourke and the child, including staff exits. Reynolds stared at him, then at Sky. We're handling it. In writing, Sky said, voice controlled. She held her phone low, recording her own words and Reynolds' response without shoving it in anyone's face. We're requesting it. Right now. Patient advocate Jacobs arrived, clipboard under his arm, eyes wary. What's going on now? Mason's tone didn't change. A minor was removed through a staff exit by a deputy using unverified paperwork while his mother was sedated in ICU. We have photo evidence of the vehicle. We need the hospital to preserve footage and document the timeline. Jacobs's jaw tightened. We are not releasing a child. You did, Sky said softly. Reynolds flinched. Mason didn't press the wound. He pressed the paper. We are requesting preservation, not copies, preservation. Jacobs looked toward the administrator in the blazer, same one from before, who approached with tired eyes and the posture of someone who wanted the night to disappear. We're doing everything we can, the administrator said. Mason nodded once. Then write it down. Jacobs hesitated, then said, I will document a request for preservation, and I will alert hospital counsel. Sky's voice stayed steady. Include that the deputy presented unverified custody documents twice and attempted removal. Jacobs's eyes flicked to Reynolds. Reynolds didn't contradict it. Fine, Jacobs said. I'll note it. Mason took that as a win, not because it felt good, but because it was a brick in a wall Rourke would have to climb. Thank you, he said, and turned away before anyone could bait him into a scene. Outside again, Tank and the other club guy, Spade, moved with them toward the edge of the lot, keeping their distance from sheriff's units parked like silent threats. Spade spoke low. You want us to follow them? Mason didn't hesitate. No, Spade's eyes narrowed. We can track. You can crash, Mason said, and then we lose Lena and Eli and we gain a funeral. He pointed toward the brake line with his chin. They already tried. Tank's mouth went hard. So what do we do? Mason looked at Sky. We collect people who saw everything. They started with the diner. Donna was still there when they arrived, apron on, hands shaking as she wiped a counter that was already clean. The place was quieter now, late night empty, but her eyes were wide like the afternoon never ended. When she saw Mason and Sky, she didn't smile. She didn't scold. She just said, Did he take the boy? Mason nodded once. Yes. Donna's face crumpled for a second before she caught herself. I knew it. Sky pulled out her phone, opened notes, and asked gently, Donna, I need you to tell me exactly what you saw. Times if you can. Words if you remember. Donna swallowed. I saw him, Eli, come in alone. I saw him count his coins. I heard him ask for soup, and I saw Deputy Rourke come in right after and look at you like he wanted to burn you." "Did you see him touch Eli?" Mason asked. Donna nodded quick. "He put his hand on his shoulder when they left. Friendly to everybody else, not friendly to the boy." Sky wrote it down. "Do you have cameras?" Donna's eyes flicked to the ceiling. "We do." Mason kept his voice careful. "Can you preserve the footage from today?" Donna's hands tightened on the rag. "Sheriff's office already called. They told me not to give anything to outsiders." Sky's jaw tightened. "Of course they did." Donna leaned in, voice shaking. "I'm not stupid. If I lose that footage, they'll call it an accident. If I keep it, they'll call it obstruction." Mason didn't pressure her. "Then don't give it to us. Just don't delete it. Back it up. If anybody comes for it, tell them it's already preserved for counsel." Donna stared at him. "Counsel like lawyers." "Exactly," Sky said. Donna nodded once like she'd just chosen a side she didn't want. "Okay." Next stop was the motel. The manager didn't want to talk. He kept the office chain on the door and spoke through a crack like they were disease. "I don't want trouble," he said. "You already have it," Sky replied. Mason held his phone out, not recording him, just showing the photo of the ambulance bay timestamp from earlier and the plate image. "We're not asking you to fight anyone. We're asking you if you saw Deputy Rourke at room 12 today." The manager's eyes flicked left and right like the parking lot had ears. "He was here." "What time?" Mason asked. The manager swallowed. "Afternoon, after the diner. He walked up like he owned the hallway." "Did you see him touch her?" Sky asked. The manager's throat worked. "I saw her flinch." Mason didn't ask him to say more than he could survive. "Do you have camera coverage?" The manager's eyes darted to a dusty monitor behind him. "Not good." "Preserve what you have," Sky said, "even if it's just the lot." The manager hesitated, then nodded once. "Okay." On the way out, Sky's phone rang. She listened, then handed it to Mason without a word. The voice on the other end was the older deputy from the motel, tired, low. "He's headed to Maple Ridge." Mason's eyes narrowed. "What's Maple Ridge?" "A private property outside town," the deputy said. "Old hunting lodge. Sheriff's office uses it for retreats, off-the-books meetings." Sky's face went pale. "How do you know?" The deputy hesitated. "Because I've been told to drive there, and I'm not going. And because the SUV you photographed belongs to the county pool. That plate is registered to Fleet." Mason's jaw tightened. "You're sure?" "Yes," the deputy said. "And I'm telling you so you don't ride in there like a war, because you won't come back." Mason's voice stayed flat. "We're not riding in." "Good," the deputy said. "Then listen, State Police Duty Sergeant is awake tonight. If anyone can move without the sheriff shutting it down, it's them. And if you have someone above the sheriff, someone with a signature, now is when you call them." Mason's hand tightened around the phone. "Why are you helping?" Silence for a beat. Then the deputy said, "Because that kid's face didn't look like a kid who gets picked up for ice cream." The call ended. Sky looked at Mason. "Maple Ridge." Mason didn't answer her right away. He pulled out the card again and stared at the seal under the motel office light. Then he dialed. The voice answered on the first ring like she'd been waiting with the phone in her hand. "Yes." "He took the child," Mason said. "Hospital staff exit. County Fleet SUV. We have the plate. He may be heading to a property called Maple Ridge." A pause. Then, for the first time, the voice sounded angry. "I know Maple Ridge." "Then stop him," Sky snapped, unable to hold it in. The voice ignored the snap and spoke to Mason like this was a procedure. "Go to the state police duty desk, not the sheriff. Tell them you are reporting unlawful removal of a minor from a hospital by a county deputy with unverified custody documentation. Provide the plate photo. Provide witness names. Tell them to contact my office." Mason's eyes narrowed. "What office?" "You'll know in 5 minutes," the voice said. "An investigator will meet you at the state police barracks. Do not go to Maple Ridge. Do not attempt to retrieve the child yourself." Sky's hands clenched. "He's a kid. And that's why you don't turn this into a gunfight," the voice replied, colder now. "Drive to the barracks, now." The line went dead. Sky exhaled hard. "She's ordering us." "She's protecting us from ourselves," Mason said. "They didn't use their bikes. They didn't risk the brake line." Tank drove a plain rental sedan off the highway lot. No logos, no roar, nothing that looked like a pack. Mason sat in the passenger seat with his phone ready. Sky rode in back, collecting notes, timestamps, names, making the chaos into a timeline. At the state police barracks, the fluorescent lights were harsh and honest. A duty sergeant met them at the counter with a face that didn't care about patches or rumors. "What's this about?" he asked. Mason put the phone down on the counter, screen showing the plate. A child was removed from county hospital by Deputy Rourke using unverified custody paperwork. Mothers sedated in ICU. The deputy exited through a staff corridor. Hospital staff have documented it. We're reporting it here. The sergeant's eyes tightened. "You have a case number?" "We're making one," Sky said. The sergeant stared at them a second longer, then nodded toward a side room. "In here." They sat at a metal table. Mason gave the story without heat, facts only. Sky gave names and times. Tank handed over a list of witnesses. The sergeant asked questions like he was building a file, brick by brick. Halfway through, the door opened and a man stepped in wearing plain clothes and an ID clipped to his belt. He wasn't sheriff. He wasn't hospital. He looked like someone who lived in documents and decisions. He introduced himself without flourish. "Investigator Klein, County Circuit." Sky's eyes narrowed. "Circuit Court?" Klein's gaze went to Mason. "You spoke with my judge." Mason's jaw tightened. "So she is a judge." Klein didn't confirm it directly. He didn't have to. "Give me everything you have," he said, and his voice carried a kind of authority that didn't need volume. Mason slid his phone across the table. Plate photo, video from the hallway, audio from 911, notes from Donna, the motel manager, the supervisor's statements. Klein watched the plate image, and something in his face hardened. "Fleet vehicle." Sky leaned in. "Maple Ridge." Klein's eyes flicked up. "Do not say that name loudly." The duty sergeant frowned. "You know that place?" Klein didn't answer him. He looked at Mason. "You did the right thing by not chasing." Mason's voice stayed steady. "We don't care about being right. We care about the kid." Klein nodded once. "Then here's what happens." He pulled out a folder of his own. Real paper, real letterhead, not something printed in a panic. "Emergency petition, child welfare, judicial review at first light, and an immediate directive to locate and return the minor to hospital custody pending investigation." Sky's breath caught. "You can do that tonight?" Klein looked at her like she'd forgotten what a judge could do. "My judge can." He stood. "You're going to stay available for statements. You're going to keep your people calm, and you are going to let state police do the retrieval." Mason held his gaze. "If they find him," Klein's voice didn't soften. "They will." At 2:17 a.m., the duty sergeant printed the directive and stamped it. Klein signed where he was authorized to sign, then left the room with the paper in his hand like it weighed more than a gun. Mason watched him go and felt something shift, small but real. For the first time since Eli poured those coins on the diner table, the night wasn't just fear and rumor. It was a case. The barracks clock read 2:41 a.m. when the duty sergeant pushed his chair back and started moving with a different kind of speed. Not panic, procedure. He slid the directive into a plastic sleeve, handed it to a trooper with a fresh cup of coffee, and said, "Get me a unit with a child seat, call CPS duty line, and pull every address associated with Deputy Rourke, home, family, county property, everything." Investigator Klein didn't hover. He stood near the doorway like a hinge between worlds, phone to his ear, speaking in short, controlled sentences. Mason sat at the metal table and watched men and paper turn into motion. Sky's pen scratched as she tightened the timeline again. Diner, motel, ambulance, hospital staff corridor, radiology exit, plate photo, preservation request, online post, crowd. Every detail that felt small was a nail you could drive later. Tank and Spade stayed quiet in the corner, not looking like muscle, just looking like two tired guys who'd been awake too long and didn't know what to do with their hands. The duty sergeant came back in with a printout and slid it across to Mason. "That plate you photographed, county fleet, assigned to admin pool, not supposed to leave city limits without sign out." Sky's jaw tightened. "So he logged it?" "Or he didn't," the sergeant said. "Either way, it's traceable." Klein ended his call and finally stepped fully into the room. "We have probable location," he said. Mason's eyes locked on him. "Maple Ridge." Klein didn't flinch. "Yes." Tank shifted in the corner, irritation flashing. "Then go." "We are," the duty sergeant said, flat. "You are not." Sky leaned forward. "He's 6. He's with a man who already forged paperwork." Klein's voice stayed calm, but it carried weight now. "And if you show up in vests, he claims armed gang intimidation, and the sheriff's office turns this into a standoff. We are not giving him that." Mason forced his hands to unclench. "Then tell me what you need." Klein looked at him for a beat like he was measuring whether Mason could follow instructions when rage was hot. "Stay available," Klein said. "Your statement will be attached." "Your photo is evidence. Your restraint is the reason this doesn't collapse." Mason nodded once. "What about Lena?" Klein's eyes flicked briefly, then back. "Hospital has restricted visitor notes now. ICU is aware. If Rourke tries to enter, it gets logged." Sky's voice was sharp. "Log doesn't stop him." Klein didn't sugarcoat it. "No, but it gives us the paper to take him apart." A trooper opened the door and called, "Sarge." The duty sergeant stood. "Move." The room emptied fast. Papers became folders. Folders became sealed bags. Phones became recorded evidence. Names became case numbers. Mason stood too, instinct pulling him toward the hallway, toward wherever Eli was. Klein put a hand up, not touching him, just stopping him with air. "You stay." Mason didn't argue. He stared at Klein and forced the question out steady. "If he's at Maple Ridge, what's he doing with the kid?" Klein's jaw tightened. "Keeping him off the grid long enough to make a story true." Sky swallowed. "What story?" Klein's voice dropped. "That he's the guardian, that the mother is unstable, that the bikers are predators, that the hospital panicked, that law enforcement rescued the child." Mason felt his stomach twist. "So he's rewriting reality." Klein nodded once. "That's what he does." The duty sergeant returned, jacket on, hat in hand. "We roll in too, quiet. No sirens unless we have to." Klein grabbed his folder. "Call me when you have eyes on." Then they were gone. The door shut and the room got smaller again. Mason sat back down because he didn't trust his legs. Sky kept writing even though there was nothing new to write, like ink could keep the night from spinning. Tank finally spoke, low. "I could be there in 8 minutes." Mason didn't look at him. "And then what?" Tank's mouth tightened. "Then I take the kid." "With what?" Mason asked. "Your hands? Your pride?" Tank's eyes flashed. "With my spine." Mason's voice stayed flat. "You walk into sheriff property and take a child from a deputy, you give him the only thing he needs, a reason." Tank's jaw worked. He hated it, but he heard it. Spade's voice came quiet. "So we wait." Mason nodded once. "We wait, and we don't let our anger write his ending." A minute later, Sky's phone buzzed with a message. She read it, then looked up, face tight. "Donna," she said. "Sheriff's office came into the diner, told her to hand over footage." Mason's stomach dropped. "She did?" Sky shook her head. "She told them it's preserved for counsel. They threatened her." Tank's hands clenched. "We go there." "No," Mason said. "We don't leave this barracks, not until Eli's located." Sky's eyes flicked to the duty sergeant's empty chair. If they're leaning on the diner, they're leaning on the motel too. Mason stared at the evidence bag with his phone inside it, like it was a locked door between him and action. "Let them lean," he said. "Everything they do becomes pattern." The clock moved slow. 3:08, 3:19, 3:27. At 3:31, a trooper stepped into the room with a portable radio and set it on the table without a word. The duty sergeant's voice crackled through it, clipped and controlled. "We are on scene. Visual on County Fleet SUV. 2 additional county units present. No lights." Sky's breath caught. Tank stood without realizing it. Mason didn't move. He forced himself to listen. The radio hissed. "Approaching property line. Establishing perimeter." A pause. Then, "Contact. Subject identified as Deputy Rourke. He is presenting paperwork." Klein's voice cut in briefly over another channel, calm and cold. "Do not accept verbal claims. Execute directive. Confirm miner's location." Mason closed his eyes for 1 second, then opened them again. He pictured Maple Ridge without ever seeing it. Dark trees, a lodge, a man with a badge smiling while a child sat silent. He pictured Eli's face behind that glass in the SUV, eyes begging and helpless. The radio crackled again. Rourke refusing entry. State's property is under sheriff's jurisdiction. Another voice, steady. State directive supersedes. We are here for the minor. Mason's hands were flat on the table, still, visible, like he could prove to himself he wasn't the kind of man who exploded. Skye whispered, "Please." The radio hissed, a longer pause than before. Then, we have visual on the minor through front window. He appears unharmed. He is seated, blanket around shoulders. Mason's throat tightened so hard it hurt. Tank exhaled like he'd been holding air for hours. Klein's voice, sharper now. Retrieve, a burst of static. Then, Rourke is stepping back. He is recording with his phone. He is stating this is unlawful. Another pause. Then the words came, plain and brutal. Minor is in our custody. Skye's eyes filled immediately. She wiped them fast like she was angry at them. Mason didn't move for a full second. He couldn't. His spine felt too tight. The radio continued. Transporting to barracks. CPS en route. Rourke is not detained at this time. He's being instructed not to contact the child or the mother. Mason's jaw flexed at the last part. Not detained. Not yet. Paper took time, but Eli was coming back. Skye leaned forward, voice low and shaking. Bring him to his mom. He'll try again, Mason said quietly. If he isn't stopped properly, he'll try again. Tank's voice was rough. Then stop him properly. Klein's voice came through the radio again, quieter now. Secure chain of custody. Document minor's condition. Photograph any marks. Collect minor statement with CPS present. Then hospital. Mason stared at the ceiling for a beat, as if he could see through it to the road they were driving. The trooper's hands steady on the wheel, the child seat buckled, the blanket held tight. At 4:12 a.m., headlights cut across the barracks lot. A state unit pulled in, then another. A trooper opened the back door, and Eli stepped out slowly, blanket dragging like it was too heavy for him. His face was pale, his hair was messy, his eyes looked too old. A woman in a plain coat walked beside him, CPS duty worker, badge visible, posture careful. Eli didn't run to Mason. He didn't even take a full step toward him. He just looked at Mason like he was checking if promises still existed. Mason crouched slightly without crowding him. "Hey," he said, voice low. "You're safe." Eli's lower lip trembled. He forced words out like they were stuck. "He said you were going to jail." Mason kept his face calm. "I'm right here." Eli's eyes filled, but he didn't cry loud. He whispered, "He said my mom doesn't want me." Skye's breath hitched. She didn't step closer. She didn't grab him. She stayed still so she wouldn't scare him. Mason felt something hot rise in his chest and forced it down until it was just a steady voice. "He lied?" Eli stared at him, searching, trying to find the edge where truth ended. The CPS worker spoke gently. "Eli, we're going to take you back to the hospital so you can be near your mom, okay? You'll have people with you the whole time." Eli's eyes snapped toward the road, fear flaring again. He can take me again. Mason didn't promise forever. He promised tonight. "Not tonight," he said. "Not while we're standing here." The ride back to the hospital wasn't loud. No engines, no pack. Just a state unit in front, a plain sedan behind, and the kind of quiet that happens when everyone is afraid a single wrong word will undo the only thing that matters. Eli sat in the back seat of the trooper's cruiser in a child seat that looked too big for him. The blanket was tucked under his chin. His hands stayed clenched in the fabric, like if he let go, the world would change again. The CPS worker, Miss Laird, rode in the passenger seat, turned half around so she could keep her voice gentle. "Eli, do you remember the address where you were taken tonight?" Eli's eyes stayed on the window. "Maple Ridge." The trooper's jaw tightened, but he didn't react out loud. "Who took you there?" Ms. Laird asked. Eli swallowed. "Mike." Mason followed in the rental with Skye and Tank, watching the state unit's taillights like they were a lifeline. Skye's voice was low. "He said Mike at the motel, Mike at the diner. It was him the whole time." Mason didn't answer. He kept his eyes forward, forcing himself to stay inside the rules that were finally working. When they reached County Hospital, the front entrance looked different than it had hours ago. Not quieter, tighter. 2 state troopers stood by the doors now. Hospital security hovered closer than before. A woman in a blazer spoke into her phone near the reception desk, face pale, eyes sharp. The automatic doors opened and cold air rushed into warm fluorescent light. Eli stepped out slowly. Ms. Laird stayed beside him, hand near his shoulder but not grabbing, letting him feel he still owned his body. Skye stopped a few feet away, hands down, voice soft. "Hey, Eli." Eli didn't run to her. He didn't run to anyone. He just looked at Mason again like he was measuring whether the promise still held. Mason crouched slightly, not crowding. "We're here. You're not alone." Eli nodded once, tiny, and then his eyes flicked toward the hallway that led deeper into the hospital. "Where's my mom?" Ms. Laird answered gently. "ICU. We're going to get you close." The triage nurse recognized them immediately, and her face tightened with a tired kind of fear. She started to speak, then stopped when she saw the state uniforms and the CPS badge. Supervisor Reynolds appeared behind the desk like she'd been dragged out of a back room. She looked like she hadn't slept since yesterday, eyes rimmed red. Her gaze locked on Eli and her mouth parted. "He's back." Ms. Laird didn't let it become emotional. "We need a private room near ICU for the child, and we need to confirm the mother's status." Reynolds nodded, quick, relieved to have a clear instruction. "Ms. Henson is here." The social worker stepped out from behind the admin corridor and froze when she saw Eli. Her face crumpled for a second before she caught herself. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered. Eli hesitated, then took a half step toward her. Not because he trusted hospitals now, but because Ms. Henson was the last adult who'd tried to keep him from disappearing. Ms. Henson crouched. "I'm so sorry," she said quietly. Eli shook his head fast. "He said you gave me away." Ms. Henson's eyes filled. "I didn't. I tried to stop it." Ms. Laird cut in softly but firmly, keeping the child from drowning in adult guilt. "Let's get him to a safe room, now." A security guard moved to open the staff corridor door, but a trooper stopped him with a glance. "We stay in public halls," he said. "No side exits, no shortcuts." Reynolds nodded, swallowing. "Of course." They started down the main corridor toward ICU. Not fast, not slow, controlled. Halfway there, an alarm chirped once from a side door. Not the building alarm, just a door sensor. A nurse hurried out and spoke to another staff member under her breath, eyes flicking toward the lobby. "They're back." Skye's spine went tight. "Who?" The answer walked in before anyone had to say it. Deputy Rourke came through the main entrance like he was returning to his own house. Same clean uniform, same smile. But his eyes were hard now, sharpened by the fact that the night hadn't gone the way he expected. 2 county deputies followed him, and behind them, just a few steps back like he didn't want to be filmed too close, Sheriff Braddock himself. A heavier man. Older. Calm in the way powerful people get calm when they're used to rooms bending. The lobby shifted immediately. Nurses stiffened. Security straightened. The administrator in the blazer moved like she'd been waiting for the sheriff's presence to make the problem official. Rourke's gaze snapped to Eli and warmed artificially. "Buddy," he called, friendly enough to make strangers think he was rescuing him. Eli flinched so hard his blanket slipped, and he pulled it back up with shaking hands. Mason stepped subtly, placing himself between Eli and the line of sight without touching the child. Rourke's smile thinned when he saw that. Sheriff Braddock approached, hands relaxed, voice smooth. "Evening," he said to the troopers. "Or morning. Depends how tired you are." One of the state troopers didn't match the charm. "Sheriff?" Braddock's eyes drifted to Eli like he was looking at a file, not a kid. "This child was removed from my deputy's protective custody," he said. "We're here to correct that." Ms. Laird's voice stayed level. "The child was removed unlawfully from a hospital. CPS is taking temporary custody pending judicial review." Braddock's mouth tightened slightly. "CPS works with the county." Ms. Laird didn't blink. "CPS works with the law." Rourke stepped forward half a pace. "He's confused," he said, still warm. "He ran from the hospital. We brought him somewhere safe. These bikers—" "Stop," the state trooper said, quiet and flat, not loud, final. Rourke froze mid-sentence, smile stuck on his face like glue. The trooper turned his head toward Braddock. "We have a directive, we have documentation. If you want to challenge it, you challenge it with the issuing authority, not by approaching the child." Braddock's eyes sharpened. "Issuing authority being who?" A voice answered from behind them before anyone else could. "Me." Investigator Klein stepped into the lobby in plain clothes, folder under his arm. Behind him, a woman in a dark coat walked with the kind of stillness that had been watching all night. No rush, no hesitation. She didn't need to show a badge to change the air. Rourke's smile twitched, almost breaking. Braddock's gaze moved to her and his face tightened. He knew her. Klein didn't introduce her. He didn't have to. He spoke to Braddock like he was reading from procedure. "Circuit has assumed jurisdiction due to conflict of interest and credible evidence of falsified custody documentation." Braddock's voice stayed polite, but it turned icy. "Conflict of interest?" The woman finally spoke, and her voice was the same one on the phone, controlled, precise. "Deputy Rourke's involvement with the mother and child, his actions at the hospital, the unfiled order presented to staff, the removal through a staff exit while the mother was sedated. That's enough." Rourke lifted his chin. "Your Honor, do not address me," she said, not loud, not dramatic, just a door closing. Rourke's jaw flexed. "I was protecting a child." "You were controlling a child," she replied. "There's a difference." Eli's eyes stayed locked on Mason now, because the adults had turned dangerous again, and he didn't know which uniforms meant safety. Ms. Laird leaned down to Eli. "We're going to ICU. You stay with me." Eli nodded quickly, desperate. Braddock stepped closer, voice tight. "With respect, Judge, this is my county. You're creating a spectacle." The judge didn't react to the word. "The spectacle was created when your deputy turned a hospital into a hunting ground." Rourke's smile returned, forced. "There's a lot of misinformation being pushed by—" Klein cut him off without raising his voice. "Deputy Rourke, you are under directive not to contact the minor or attempt access to the mother. Violate it, and you will be detained." Rourke stared at Klein as if he wanted to peel the words off him with his hands. Then his eyes flicked to Eli again, and he softened his tone like a weapon changing shape. "Eli," he said gently, "come on, buddy, let's not make this scary." Eli's breath caught. He didn't move. The blanket trembled in his fists. Mason's voice stayed low. "Don't talk to him." Rourke's eyes snapped to Mason, smile tightening. "You don't get to—" The judge looked at Mason once, not approving, not disapproving, measuring. Then she looked back at Rourke. "Stop speaking to the child." Rourke's smile cracked for the first time. Not fully, just enough to show the anger underneath. He stepped back half a pace like he was conceding gracefully. "Of course." Ms. Laird guided Eli forward, and the troopers formed a quiet corridor around them, not dramatic, just bodies placed where bodies needed to be. They moved toward ICU. As they walked, Ms. Henson kept pace on the other side, whispering to Reynolds, "Put a hard restriction on the mother's chart. No law enforcement access without court order. Log every attempt." Reynolds nodded, voice thin. "IT said someone tried to remove the restriction earlier." Sky's eyes narrowed. "Who?" Reynolds swallowed. "It came through a county access code." Mason didn't look back toward the lobby, but he felt Rourke's presence like heat behind his neck. In the ICU corridor, the air got colder and cleaner. Doors stayed shut. Nurses moved with focus, not gossip. A sign on the wall read, "Quiet Zone," like it was begging. An ICU nurse met them, eyes sharp, already informed. "Lena Harper," she said. "She's stable enough for a brief window view. No entry, no touching. She is intubated and sedated." Eli's face tightened. "Can she hear me?" The nurse hesitated, then answered honestly, "Sometimes people hear more than we think. You can talk to her." They stopped at a glass panel. Beyond it, Lena lay still under white sheets, tubes, tape, a machine breathing for her. Her hair was brushed back, her face pale now without fever flush. The bruising on her forearm was visible where the gown sleeve ended, ugly against hospital white. Eli pressed closer to the glass, not touching it, just hovering like he was afraid the room would punish him for wanting her. "Mom," he whispered, no response. Just the steady rhythm of the machine. Eli's voice cracked. "I got soup," he said, and then he swallowed hard like the words hurt. "I tried." Ms. Laird knelt beside him, letting him have his moment without making it a performance. Skye turned away for a second, eyes wet, jaw clenched. Mason stood still, hands down, watching the child and the woman in the tube that kept her alive, and feeling the name Harper pulsing in his chest like an old bruise. Klein stepped beside him, low enough that only Mason heard. "Why did that name hit you in the diner?" Mason didn't answer immediately. He watched Eli speak to the glass like it was a door he couldn't open. Then he said, "Quiet." "Because I knew a Harper." Klein's eyes didn't move. "Family?" Mason's jaw flexed. "Brother, not by blood." Klein held his gaze. "Tell me the truth, Mason, not the story." Mason exhaled once. "He rode with us. He died. He made me promise something about his people. I didn't keep it." Klein didn't ask for drama. "And Lena?" Mason stared through the glass. "I don't know yet. But that wristband, that last name, the kid's face, it's not random." Klein nodded once, like that was enough for now. "You say that in a statement, carefully. Facts, no club mythology." Mason's voice stayed flat. "I can do facts." Down the hall, footsteps approached again, heavier, more official. Sheriff Braddock had followed as far as ICU allowed, staying just outside the quiet zone with Rourke at his shoulder. They weren't close enough to touch anything, but close enough to be pressure. Braddock spoke without raising his voice. "Judge, this is inappropriate. You're disrupting a medical facility." The judge turned her head slightly, eyes steady. "You're standing in an ICU corridor at 4 a.m. because your deputy wants a child. Don't lecture me on disruption." Rourke's smile was gone now. His face was tight, and his eyes kept flicking to Eli like he was calculating distance and angles. "Ms. Laird stood, positioning herself between Eli and the hallway instinctively. The trooper shifted, subtle. The judge's voice stayed calm. "Sheriff Braddock, you will leave this wing. Deputy Rourke will leave the building. If either of you remains, state will remove you." Braddock's nostrils flared. He stared at her like he wanted to fight on principle, then made the calculation every politician makes. Losing here would look worse than leaving. He nodded once, stiff. "This isn't finished." "No," the judge replied. "Now it's started properly." Braddock turned. Rourke didn't. Rourke stood still for one last second, staring at Eli's small back, blanket bunched in his fists, whispering through glass to a mother who couldn't answer. Then Rourke leaned toward Mason, voice low enough to slip under the hospital's quiet rule. "You don't know what you're doing," he murmured. "You're picking a fight you can't win." Mason didn't react with his body. He reacted with one sentence. "Stay away from the child." Rourke's mouth twisted into something close to a smile. "Or what?" The judge's voice cut through, calm and lethal. "Deputy Rourke, out, now." For the first time that night, Rourke obeyed without a performance. He turned and walked away, shoulders tight, as if every step was a promise. Eli didn't look back. He kept whispering to the glass, voice small and urgent, trying to pour his whole fear into words she might hear. And when Ms. Laird finally touched his shoulder gently and said, "Okay, Eli, we need to move you to a safe room now," he turned to Mason with red eyes and asked, barely audible, "Are you going to leave again?" Mason didn't answer Eli right away, because the kid's question wasn't about tonight. It was about the way adults vanish when things get hard. He crouched just enough to meet Eli's eyes without boxing him in. "I'm not leaving you," he said. "Not like that. Not again." Eli's face tightened like he wanted to believe it, and was afraid belief was dangerous. "He said you would." "He lies," Mason said. "That's what he does." Ms. Laird kept her hand near Eli's shoulder, careful not to grab. "Eli, we're going to a quiet room near ICU. You'll be close to your mom. You'll have staff and troopers with you, okay?" Eli nodded once, then looked back through the glass at Lena's still face. He whispered something only he could hear, then turned away like it hurt. They walked him down the ICU corridor, past doors that stayed shut and nurses who pretended they weren't watching. No side exits this time, no staff shortcuts, main halls only. every step documented by the simple fact that there were too many professional eyes on it now. A small family consult room opened. 2 chairs, a couch, a box of tissues, a laminated poster about grief. Ms. Henson was already inside with a notebook, face pale but steady. Ms. Laird guided Eli to the couch. Eli sat with the blanket bunched under his chin, hands clenched in it like it was the only thing that didn't change. Ms. Laird sat across from him, voice calm. Eli, I'm going to ask you a few questions. You can say, I don't know. You can ask me to stop. And if you need a break, you tell me. Eli stared at her, then flicked his eyes to Mason in the doorway. Mason didn't come in. He stayed at the threshold, visible but not looming. I'm right here, he said quietly. Eli's shoulders dropped a fraction. Ms. Laird began, gentle and firm. When you were taken tonight, who took you? Eli swallowed. Mike. Ms. Henson's pen paused. Ms. Laird didn't rush him. Mike who? Eli hesitated, then whispered, Deputy Rourke. The air in the room tightened. Ms. Laird's face didn't change, but her voice sharpened into clarity. Deputy Rourke took you from the hospital and drove you somewhere? Eli nodded fast. He said it was okay because he had paper. What paper? Ms. Laird asked. Eli squeezed the blanket harder. He had a folder. He waved it. Ms. Henson's pen moved again. Ms. Laird kept her voice soft. Where did he take you? Maple Ridge, Eli whispered. The lodge. Was anyone else there? Ms. Laird asked. Eli's eyes darted to the door like he was checking if the deputy could appear through it. A man with boots, big. He smelled like smoke. He didn't talk to me. He talked to Mike. Mason's jaw tightened. He didn't step in. He didn't ask questions. He let the professionals do what they were trained to do. Ms. Laird said, Did Deputy Rourke touch you? Eli nodded, small. He grabbed my arm when I cried. Not hard like a punch, hard like I had to stop. Ms. Laird's voice stayed calm. Did he hurt your mom? Eli stared down at his blanket. His voice went thin. He makes her quiet. How? Ms. Laird asked. Eli's lips trembled. He squeezes her arm. He says he's helping. She flinches. Ms. Henson's pen scratched harder. Ms. Laird leaned forward slightly. Eli, has he ever hit you? Eli didn't answer for a long second. Then he whispered, Not with his hand. He locks the door and says I have to be good. If I'm not good, Mom cries. Ms. Laird's eyes softened, but her voice stayed steady. Thank you for telling me. You're doing the right thing. Eli's eyes filled. He blinked hard like he was trying to force the tears back into his skull. He said my mom doesn't want me. That's not true, Ms. Henson said too quickly, then caught herself and looked at Ms. Laird like she'd broken a rule. Ms. Laird didn't scold her. She just turned to Eli. Your mom has been asking for you. The doctors heard her. Eli's chin wobbled. He said you gave me away. Ms. Henson's voice shook once, then steadied. I didn't. I tried to stop it. I'm sorry you got scared. Eli nodded, small, like apology was a language he understood too well. Outside the consult room, Investigator Klein spoke quietly with a state trooper. The judge stood a few feet away, arms folded, listening like she was weighing each word on a scale. Klein's eyes met Mason's. We have enough for immediate action, he said low. Mason didn't ask what action looked like. Do it, he said. Klein's gaze was sharp. I need your statement. The diner, the motel, the hospital, everything you saw. Mason nodded once. Now. Klein led him to a small admin alcove, clipboard, chair, blank form. A trooper stood nearby, not guarding Mason, guarding the process. Mason gave facts, timestamps, exact words when he could remember them, who stood where, what Rourke said, how he tried to stop the ambulance, how he presented an unverified document, how Eli ran, how Rourke used the confusion to pull him toward the staff exit, how the fleet SUV left. Klein wrote without drama. You recognized the last name, he said, not looking up. Mason's throat tightened. Yes. Why? Mason held still. A man rode with us, last name Harper. He died. I made a promise about his people. I didn't keep it. Klein finally looked up. Name of the man who rode with you. Mason said it flat, like a fact in a report, not a story. Caleb Harper. The judge's eyes flicked over, sharp. Klein kept writing. Your relationship to Lena Harper? I don't know her, Mason said. Not personally. Not until tonight. The judge stepped closer, voice calm. You're sure? Mason met her gaze. I'm sure, but the name isn't common where I'm from. The judge held his eyes for 1 second longer, then nodded once like she'd file it and come back later. A trooper stepped into the alcove, voice clipped. Judge, Sheriff Braddock is in the lobby again. The judge didn't react emotionally. She simply turned. He's persistent. Klein stood. I'm getting the warrant drafted. For Rourke? The trooper asked. For Rourke, Klein said, and for anyone who interferes. They moved back toward the main corridor. The hospital felt different now. Staff had been told something without being told everything. You could see it in the way nurses avoided the lobby windows, in the way security kept looking at state uniforms like they were a shield. In the lobby, Sheriff Braddock stood near the entrance with 2 county deputies. Rourke was with him, posture rigid, smile gone. He wasn't trying to charm anymore. He was trying to win by weight. Braddock's voice carried just enough. My deputy acted in good faith. Your people have overreached. The judge walked into the lobby with Klein at her side and didn't slow down. You don't get to lecture me about good faith, she said. Braddock's eyes tightened. You're making this political. You made it personal, she replied, when your deputy used a hospital as a playground. Rourke's gaze snapped to the judge, and for a moment the anger leaked out. I had authority. Klein didn't argue. He simply said, show it. Braddock lifted his chin. You have no jurisdiction to, the judge cut him off. Try me. The lobby went still. Even the civilians who'd wanted a show earlier had gone quiet, suddenly aware that the room had turned serious in a way cameras couldn't make fun. Rourke's jaw flexed. He looked toward the ICU corridor like he could feel Eli's presence through walls. You can't keep him, Rourke said, voice controlled but strained. He belongs with me. Ms. Laird appeared from the hallway, CPS badge visible. He does not. Rourke's eyes narrowed. He's a confused kid. Ms. Laird didn't blink. He identified you. He identified the location you took him. He described your behavior, and we have a state directive. Braddock stepped forward half a pace, voice low. You're going to believe a child over law enforcement? Ms. Laird's voice stayed level. I believe evidence over power. The judge turned to Klein. Warrant. Klein opened his folder. In progress, but we have enough for immediate detention if he attempts contact again. Rourke's mouth tightened into something ugly. Detain me for what? Doing my job? The judge's tone stayed calm. Your job does not include removing a minor from a hospital through a staff corridor while the mother is sedated, presenting unfiled custody documents, and using county resources to hide the child at a private property. Braddock's face hardened. Allegations. Klein's voice was flat. Statements. Rourke's eyes darted, quick, calculating toward the doors, toward the lot, toward the path out. Mason saw it and didn't move because moving would look like threat. He just watched. The judge did move, though. Not fast, not dramatic. She simply shifted so the state troopers had a clear line. Deputy Rourke, she said, you are ordered to leave this facility and have no contact with the child or the mother. If you violate that, you will be detained. Rourke stared at her like he wanted to argue on instinct and realized the room wasn't bending for him anymore. Then he did something small and telling. He smiled. Not the friendly smile, the one he'd worn at the diner when he knew people were watching. Of course, he said softly. I'll cooperate. He turned to leave, and as he did, Braddock stepped in closer to him, blocking the trooper's view for half a second, and murmured something into Rourke's ear that Mason couldn't hear. Rourke nodded once. Then he walked out into the night. Klein watched him go, face tight. He's going to try to wipe something, he said. The judge didn't blink. Then we moved faster. A nurse rushed out from the ICU wing, breath tight. Judge, investigator, someone just attempted to access Lena Harper's chart restrictions again. IT flagged it. County code. Klein's eyes went hard. Right now? 2 minutes ago, the nurse said. The judge turned her head slightly toward the doors Rourke had used, and her voice didn't rise, but it sharpened. Stop him, Klein snapped to the troopers. Go. Now. 2 state troopers moved fast out the entrance. No sirens, no running, just direct controlled speed. Mason stayed where he was, hands down, watching through the glass. Outside, under the lot lights, Rourke reached his SUV. He pulled the driver door open, calm as if nothing mattered. One trooper approached from the left, another from the right. Rourke turned, still smiling, phone in his hand. The trooper spoke, voice firm even through the glass. "Deputy Rourke, step away from the vehicle." Rourke lifted his hand slightly as if offended. "What's this about?" "Step away," the trooper repeated. Rourke's smile tightened. He glanced once toward the hospital doors, toward the judge, then back to the troopers. He said something Mason couldn't hear. Then the trooper reached for his wrist. Rourke's smile vanished. His arm jerked, fast, instinctive, like he was going to pull away, like he was going to turn it into resistance on camera. And the second trooper was already there. Rourke's shoulder hit the SUV. His phone skittered on the pavement. The cuffs came out. Mason watched the metal close around Rourke's wrists, and for the first time since the diner, the man with the badge looked exactly like what he was. Not authority. A problem being handled. Inside the lobby, Sheriff Braddock stepped toward the doors like he was going to intervene, and the judge spoke one sentence that stopped him cold. "Take one more step, Sheriff, and you'll be next." Braddock froze, jaw working. Outside, Rourke turned his head and looked through the glass straight at Mason, eyes burning. And even with cuffs on, his mouth formed a silent sentence Mason could read without hearing it. "This isn't over." Rourke didn't fight the cuffs for long. He twisted once, enough to make it look like resistance, enough to make a claim later, then went still when he realized the state troopers weren't playing his camera game. From inside the lobby, Mason watched the trooper pick up Rourke's phone off the pavement with a gloved hand and drop it into an evidence bag like it was a loaded weapon. Sheriff Braddock pushed toward the doors again, face tight with fury, and the judge didn't raise her voice. "Stop," she said. Braddock stopped like the word hit a wall. Klein stood beside her, already on his own phone, speaking in quick, clipped phrases. "Yes, secure the fleet vehicle. Yes, get a warrant for Maple Ridge and his residence. Preserve the hospital access logs. All county IT codes used tonight. Pull them." Braddock stared at the judge like he couldn't decide whether to threaten her or charm her. "You're humiliating my office," he said. "You're protecting it," she replied. "If you weren't, you'd be in cuffs too." Braddock's jaw worked. He looked past the judge toward the ICU corridor, then back to the parking lot where Rourke was being guided into the back of a state unit. "This is a mistake," Braddock said quietly. The judge held his gaze. "Then you'll have no problem letting evidence clear him." Braddock's eyes flicked just once toward the hospital administrator. A tiny signal. The administrator looked away like he hadn't seen it. The judge's voice stayed calm. "Sheriff Braddock, you will leave the facility. You will not contact hospital staff about this incident. You will not instruct anyone to delete, alter, or lose footage or records. If you do, I will treat it as obstruction." Braddock's face hardened. "You can't." "I can," she said, and the way she said it made the lobby feel colder. Braddock looked at Klein. "You're enjoying this?" Klein didn't blink. "I'm documenting it." Braddock turned and walked out, shoulders stiff, the kind of exit that promised retaliation later. When the doors shut behind him, the hospital exhaled like it had been holding its breath since dinner. Miss Laird moved with Eli in her shadow, keeping him away from windows, away from eyes. "Use the family consult room again. Use the family consult room again. It's closest to ICU." Eli's eyes flicked down the hall. "Can I see her?" Ms. Laird nodded. "We'll ask. If the nurse says yes, you can stand at the glass, same as before." Eli nodded once, then glanced at Mason. "Are you coming?" Mason didn't promise what he couldn't legally do. "I'll be right outside." That answer seemed to matter. Eli nodded again and kept walking. In the ICU corridor, the same nurse met them. Her face was softer now, like the weight of the night had shifted off her shoulders and onto someone else's paperwork. "She's still sedated," the nurse said, "but her vitals are steadier. You can have 2 minutes at the glass." Eli didn't waste a second. He stepped to the window and stared at Lena's face like he was trying to memorize it in case it got taken from him too. "Mom," he whispered, "I'm here." No answer, just the machine breathing for her. But Eli kept talking anyway, quiet, urgent, like words were ropes. I didn't leave. He took me. I came back. I'm here. His voice cracked and he swallowed hard and kept going. I'm gonna be good. I'm gonna listen. Just wake up. Ms. Laird watched him with an expression that stayed professional but wasn't cold. Ms. Henson wiped her eyes once and looked away, ashamed of the movement. Mason stood at the end of the corridor, hands in his pockets, forcing himself to stay still while something hot and violent kept pushing at his ribs. Klein approached and spoke low. Judge Hart is issuing a no-contact order effective immediately. Rourke won't get near them again. Mason didn't look at him. He already did. Klein's voice didn't soften. And now it's on paper. Mason finally looked over. What about the sheriff? Klein's jaw tightened. We're not ignoring him, but we do this right. You want Braddock removed? You build it. You don't throw punches at it. Mason nodded once. I'm not throwing anything. Klein watched him. Your club is still in town. Yes, Mason said. Keep them quiet, Klein replied. One wrong move and they'll paint this as outsiders pressuring the county. Mason's voice stayed flat. They're not touching anyone. Klein nodded once, accepting it, then added, I'm sending units to the diner and the motel to preserve footage before it disappears. The state is taking the lead. Mason's jaw flexed. Donna at the diner already got threatened. Klein's eyes narrowed. Then she's about to get protected. Eli's 2 minutes ended without him wanting them to. Ms. Laird touched his shoulder gently. Okay, Eli. We have to let the nurses work. Eli stepped back from the glass like it physically hurt. He took one more look at Lena, then turned and buried his face into the blanket without making a sound. Ms. Laird guided him down the hall toward the consult room again. Inside, she didn't waste time. Eli, I'm going to explain what happens next in a way that makes sense. Eli's eyes were red. He nodded without looking up. Your mom is getting medical help, Ms. Laird said. She can't take care of you today because she's very sick. That is not her fault. You are not in trouble. You are not being punished. Eli whispered, Where do I go? For right now, Ms. Laird said, you stay under CPS care. That means you stay with safe adults who cannot be told what to do by Deputy Rourke or Sheriff Braddock. Eli's breath caught at the names. Ms. Laird continued, steady. You will stay near the hospital so you can see your mom when the doctors say it's okay. You will not be taken anywhere without paperwork and people watching. Eli's eyes lifted to Mason at the door. Does that mean you? Mason didn't step in. He kept his voice low. It means I'll stay close enough that you can see I didn't disappear. Eli stared at him, then nodded once, as if that was the only version of safety he could understand. Ms. Laird turned to Ms. Henson. I need copies of your documentation from tonight. Every attempted order, every name, every time. Ms. Henson nodded fast. I already started a full report. I'll print it. Klein's voice came from the hallway, firm. And you'll preserve your notes as evidence. Do not clean them up. Do not rewrite. Keep them as is. Ms. Henson swallowed. Okay, Eli whispered. Is he going to come back? Ms. Laird answered without false comfort. He will try. People like him always try. But now there are court orders, state troopers, and investigators involved, and you will not be alone. Eli's face pinched. He said papers can say anything. Ms. Laird's eyes stayed steady. Not the right papers, not from the right court. In the hallway, Judge Hart spoke quietly to Klein. Mason couldn't hear the words, but he saw the movement. Klein handing her a page, her initialing it, her handing it back like she'd done this 1,000 times and didn't need an audience. Then she approached Mason, stopping a few feet away so she didn't crowd him. Caleb Harper, she said. Mason's throat tightened. Yes. Her eyes stayed sharp, not cruel. Lena Harper is Caleb's wife. Eli is his son. Mason didn't blink. The words landed with a weight that made the hospital walls feel too thin. She never reached out, Mason said, and it sounded like an accusation against himself more than anyone else. Judge Hart's voice stayed calm. She did. Once. A long time ago. The message didn't make it where it needed to. It happens when people are running. Mason's jaw flexed. And I was supposed to find them. You were supposed to keep a promise, she replied. But promises don't replace law. Do you understand me? Mason met her gaze. Yes. Good, she said. Because the law is what keeps him from taking that child again. Mason nodded once. Then use it. All of it. Judge Hart looked down the hall toward Eli's room, then back to Mason. Caleb was a good man. Mason didn't answer, because if he did, his voice would break. Judge Hart's expression didn't soften, but it changed. When Lena is awake enough, she will need a safe plan, not a hero plan, a safe one. Housing, medical coverage, protective order enforcement, witness protection if necessary. Mason's voice stayed flat. The club can pay for the hospital. Judge Hart's eyes narrowed. That helps, but money doesn't fix control. Control is what we're cutting out. Mason nodded. Tell me what you need, and I'll do it the clean way. Judge Hart held his gaze for 1 second longer, then nodded once like she believed him. An hour later, the sky outside the hospital windows turned a dull gray that meant morning was coming whether anyone wanted it or not. State troopers went and came in quiet waves. A trooper spoke to the hospital IT manager, and the IT manager's face went pale and then determined. A trooper spoke to the administrator, and the administrator stopped looking like a man trying to avoid a lawsuit and started looking like a man trying to survive one. Ms. Laird stepped into the hallway and motioned to Mason. We're moving Eli to a secure family room with a trooper posted. He wants food. Mason nodded. The diner. Ms. Laird hesitated. Public. Mason didn't argue. Donna's place has cameras, and my people will stay outside. No vests, no crowd inside. Ms. Laird watched his face like she was deciding whether to trust him. Then she nodded once. 5 minutes. Quiet. Mason made one call to the club. No speeches, no anger, just instructions. Diner. Keep it respectful. No vests inside, no staring. Your furniture. 77 bikes didn't roll in this time. Not to announce, to comply. Cars, trucks, quiet arrivals, people spreading out like they weren't together. When Ms. Laird walked Eli into the diner, it was early enough that only a few locals were there, cups in hand, eyes tired. Donna stood behind the counter, still in her apron from last night, looking like she'd aged 5 years. She saw Eli and her face broke for half a second before she caught it. Eli stepped in slow, blanket around his shoulders, and froze when he saw how many men were in the place, scattered, quiet, watching their coffee like they were trying to be invisible. Donna's voice shook once. Hey, baby. Eli's eyes flicked around, then found Mason near the wall, hands in his pockets, not moving closer. Is it okay? Eli whispered. Ms. Laird nodded. It's okay. Donna came around the counter slowly, kneeling behind the register barrier so she wasn't towering over him. You hungry? Eli swallowed. Can I get soup? Donna's eyes filled immediately. She blinked it back hard. Yes, you can. Eli reached into his hoodie pocket with shaking fingers and pulled out a tiny pile of coins, the same ones he'd poured out the day before. He counted them like he couldn't stop himself. $1, he whispered. 37. Mason didn't move. None of the bikers moved. The whole diner went quiet in a way that wasn't fear anymore. It was respect. Eli pushed the coins across the counter toward Donna. Not for me, he said, voice small but steady. For the next kid.